effective transport is vital. So Moreland Council has plans to help keep us moving now and into the future. Our road network is already congested and more cars will only make that worse. We need to limit the number of additional cars travelling and parking around our city if we want to keep our quality of life or make it better. Building wider or more roads isn't the answer. There just isn't land available without immense cost. The answer is in making other forms of transport more attractive, practical, accessible and available. We're lucky. Parts of Moreland are rich with transport options. In these areas, there are more opportunities to change the way we move around, and we're working to create even more transport options for everyone throughout Moreland. We're going to give more space to pedestrians and cyclists and work with the state government to improve public transport. We want residents who move into new housing that's close to public transport and shopping areas to bring fewer cars with them. We're encouraging this by allowing fewer spaces within these new buildings and continuing to limit access to on-street parking permits for these new residences. This will only happen in activity centres and not in other parts of the city. Parking restrictions already exist in many parts of the city, and we're going to extend these to better manage parking in and around our business and shopping areas. We don't want the sought-after parking in these areas taken up all day by just one car. We want to ensure the spaces can be used by multiple people visiting our shops, doing business, using our facilities, and spending time in cafes and restaurants. Of course, for some people and situations, car travel is a necessity. We're not stopping that. We're encouraging viable alternatives, because small changes can lead to big differences. That change starts with us. Victoria's population is growing, and Moreland is growing too. It's estimated that the Melbourne area will grow from 5 to 8 million people in the next few decades. They need to live somewhere. Some will choose to live here in Moreland. It's a great place to live. Moreland Council knows the challenges and opportunities that this increase in population brings. With 43,000 more people living here by 2036, there are important things to consider, plan for and act on. Things like housing, transport, our open spaces and managing the impacts of construction activity. 43,000 new people, or around 18,000 new households, means taller buildings or more buildings on existing blocks. This is not what many of us are used to, but lifestyles are changing and we need to adapt. We want to encourage these taller buildings to be located near public transport routes and where daily needs like shopping and community services are just a walk away. This way, more people won't mean lots more traffic and congestion. More flexible use of our industrial land can help too. Some land can change to accommodate new work and local jobs, and some can provide housing for more people. We are also looking at ways that some housing can remain more affordable. Council is actively buying property to improve and purchase new parks and open spaces for all residents to enjoy. This is about thoughtful planning for a great future for everyone. The things we love, the vibrant and thriving shopping areas, our great heritage areas will still be here. But changes need to happen. We want to make sure that any development is of high quality and improves livability. So we're making decisions based on research, data, world's best practice and consultation with the community. Together, we can continue to make Moreland a great place to live for our long-term residents, our new arrivals and for those who'd like to live here in the future. Moreland, one community, proudly diverse. By 2036, it's estimated there'll be 43,000 more people living here in Moreland. And they're all going to need to move about. To walk, cycle, drive, bus, tram, train, use shared vehicles, and whatever technology emerges next. Smart, effective transport is vital. So Moreland Council has plans to help keep us moving now and into the future. Our road network is already congested and more cars will only make that worse. We need to limit the number of additional cars travelling and parking around our city if we want to keep our quality of life or make it better. Building wider or more roads isn't the answer. There just isn't land available without immense cost. The answer is in making other forms of transport more attractive, practical, accessible and available. We're lucky. Parts of Moreland are rich with transport options. In these areas, there are more opportunities to change the way we move around, and we're working to create even more transport options for everyone throughout Moreland. We're going to give more space to pedestrians and cyclists and work with the state government to improve public transport. We want residents who move into new housing that's close to public transport and shopping areas to bring fewer cars with them. We're encouraging this by allowing fewer spaces within these new buildings and continuing to limit access to on-street parking permits for these new residences. This will only happen in activity centres and not in other parts of the city. Parking restrictions already exist in many parts of the city, and we're going to extend these to better manage parking in and around our business and shopping areas. We don't want the sought-after parking in these areas taken up all day by just one car. We want to ensure the spaces can be used by multiple people visiting our shops, doing business, using our facilities, and spending time in cafes and restaurants. Of course, for some people and situations, car travel is a necessity. We're not stopping that.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Natalie Abood and I am the Mayor of the Moreland City Council and the chairperson of tonight's council meeting. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting. Our meeting is being held on the traditional country of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to the elders from other communities who may be here with us today. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people call Moreland home. I also acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people never ceded sovereignty of their lands and have continuously cared for their country for over 60,000 years as the world's oldest living culture. Members of the gallery, please note that this council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand, and gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors, a reminder that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interest of the local community, and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. Please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. I'd like to introduce the other councillors in attendance this evening. Councillor Sue Bolton, who's just about to land. Councillor Helen Davidson. Good evening. Councillor Jess Dorney. Evening. The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mark Riley.
Hello.
Councillor Alia Farnley.
Evening.
Councillor John Kavanagh.
Good evening.
Councillor Dale Martin. Councillor Lambros Tapanos.
Good evening. And
Councillor Oscar Yildiz JP. The officers in attendance are to my left, Chief Executive Officer Dr. Nerina De Lorenzo, the Director of Community Development, Arden Joseph, the Director of City Infrastructure, Grant Thorne, the Acting Director of City Futures, Phil Priest, the Director of Business Transformation, Sue Vucevic, the Director of Engagements and Partnerships, Joseph Tobacco, and the Executive Manager of Finance, Liz Rowland. I'd also like to welcome this evening to the chamber the Blythe Street Children's Centre Council. Welcome.
Hi.
And before I go on, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our CEO, Dr. Nerina De Lorenzo, who has handed in her resignation, as some of you may have heard, after 4.5 years in the role. I'm sure that I speak for the whole organisation when I say that she will be missed, and we wish her all the very best in her new job. And also that the contribution she has made to the People's Republic can't be understated. Councillor Yildiz, did you just give me this?
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Yildiz has also just reminded me that we have former Mayor Mr Mark Higginbotham and former Councillor Alice Pryor in the House with us tonight. So welcome to you guys as well. There's something else that I need to do just before I move on, which is to acknowledge the passing of Shane McDermott. We've heard that Shane passed away, and we would like to send our condolences to his friends and family, and also to acknowledge the great contribution of Mr McDermott to the city, specifically to the Hope Street bus route. Okay.
Add something about his funeral.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
So for people who don't know Shane McDermott, he's a resident of West Brunswick. He campaigned and won the campaign for the Hope Street bus to be reinstated. He also did a community campaign, which he won, for council to do some plantings to attract native birds in Shields Reserve, and also some picnic seating and so forth, which didn't exist there previously. He's just a very community-minded person. Many people knew him, but not everyone necessarily knew his full name. Just a lot of local people just knew him as Shane, who is the man who got things done, and very interested in supporting the public housing estate as well. His funeral is going to be on Tuesday next week, the 18th of June, 2 p.m, at the Uniting Church in Brunswick. So if anyone knows him and wants to attend, everyone's welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I'll now ask for any apologies, and we're all here apart from having to note that Councillor Anna-Olivia Carly-Hannon is on leave of absence from the 11th of April to the 12th of August 2019. And I'll now move to requests for leave of absence.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I seek leave of absence from the 17th of June to the 30th of July to attend a study trip abroad. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanas. Could I please have a motion to grant Councillor Tapanas leave of Councillor Kavanagh, and seconded by Councillor Riley? Is there any debate on this item? All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried.
Can I also request leave from the 5th of July to the 21st of July?
Certainly. And could I have a motion for leave of absence for Councillor Yildiz, Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Afanley? Is there any debate on this motion? No. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried as well. Okay, so I'll now move on to disclosures of interests and conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare? Councillor Martin?
I'm just a conflict on one of the agenda items in regards to the gas contract. Just might be a perceived conflict there.
Yep, thank you. And so what will happen is immediately before we consider that item, I'll ask you to provide details of the type and nature of that conflict of interest, and then ask you to leave the chamber before this item is moved and to return after the item has been considered and voted on. I also need to declare a conflict of interest on, let me just get the number. Notice of motion 2519 because of a perceived personal conflict. Okay. What's that? Confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. Councillors, could I please have a motion, Councillor Riley, for the adoption of the minutes of the 8th May 2019 council meeting and the special council meeting held on 3rd of June 2019. So moved by Councillor Riley and seconded by Councillor Afanley. Is there any debate on this item? No. Put those to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Councillors, now that we have confirmed the minutes, and as we do not have any special committees, we will move on to petitions. Are there any petitions tabled by councillors? No? So is there anyone from the gallery that would like to table a petition? So if you would like to approach the podium, or you could present your petition to us and then approach the podium and you could speak to the nature of your petition. Do we have a representative of the Children's Council who'd like to get up and speak? You can come up together if you like.
You'll be right.
Yes.
Everybody up here together. Or maybe. Hello, my name's Simone. I'm the Centre Manager at Blythe Street Early Learning Centre on Blythe Street in Brunswick. I'm here with a group of children. We're known as the Children's Council at Blythe Street. We discuss issues that are important to the children in our community, and recently we've discussed the safety of our street, particularly with cars going very fast past our street and nowhere for children and families to cross safely. So we would propose that we could have a crossing on Blythe Street so that we can keep everybody safe in our community.
Thank you. And do you have a copy of the petition with you?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Would a member of the council like to bring the petition
Sorry,
up
the
for us?
petition's not ready yet.
That's okay. No rush.
We'll submit it though.
We'll have it whenever you're ready. Thank you very much. So,
Can you speak and see?
councillors, could I please have a mover for the petition to be received? Councillor Riley, and I saw Councillor Bolton as the seconder. Is there any debate on this item? I'd just like to say that I'm very happy to be voting to accept the fact that we will receive this petition from the, can you tell me the official name, the Blythe Street?
Children's Council.
Yeah, the Blythe Street Children's Council. This evening, because I think that young advocates for safety are the best type of advocates that there are. So, well done. And just for the sake of formalities, I think I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Yay! Against? Declare that closed. There's always one.
Someone out of sync.
Are there any more petitions to be tabled this evening?
That's all. Thank you from
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you. That's not. Do you have something
So
to say?
I'll now move on to public question time. This is an opportunity for 30 minutes for people to raise questions with councillors. I'd like to outline the process. Please note that if your question relates to a matter on any of the reports, this is the time to raise that question with us. Questions can also be submitted online prior to the meeting. A maximum of 2 questions is allowed per person, and questions that relate to a matter listed in the agenda will be dealt with first. When I invite you, you or your representative must ask the question without taking longer than 2 minutes. I will ring a bell at 1 minute and 45 seconds, which means that you have 15 seconds to complete your question. If you have submitted a second question, it may, at my discretion, be deferred until all other persons who have submitted questions have asked their first question, and or not be asked if the time allotted for public question time has expired. A maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject, and we will proceed on to the next topic if time allows, return to the previous topic. Either myself or another councillor will answer your question, or I will ask the Chief Executive Officer to either provide a response or refer it to another council officer. As detailed in Meeting Procedure Local Law Section 15, Section 3517, as chairperson, I have the right to disallow certain questions if it is defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, irrelevant, trivial, or objectionable in language or substance. If a response to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there will be no further formal response. However, Council will action any commitments made in answering the question. Question time can only be extended for one 30-minute period, and only for the purpose of responding to questions that are related to matters listed in this evening's agenda. If your question cannot be answered, it will be taken on notice and responded to between now and the next council meeting and reported in the governance report. We have 30 minutes and I want to make sure we hear all the questions, so I request that councillors who answer address each question succinctly. and the commencement time is 7:10. Yep, so there are two people in the gallery who have a baby at home, Vanessa Birch and Nadia. And I'd like you to come forward to present your question if you're ready. And goodbye to the Children's Council while we wait. Thank you.
I have two questions, so should I ask them both at the same time?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
So thank you for the media release today. It really helped with the clarification on the council's position to all the residents. My question's regarding the level crossing removal authority. So my first one is Coburg and Moreland train stations, the signals and cabins on Moreland Road, Tinning Street and Munro Street are all part of the significance on the Upfield Heritage Precinct. Has the council done their own heritage impact assessment? And if not, can you do one? We would also like to know what original equipment is remaining on the Munro Street signal building. LXRP are not listening, and therefore we need council ready to respond to the Victorian heritage permits about to be advertised. Can you please do the assessment so that you are prepared in advance? So that's my question number one. Question number two, staff at the recent LXRP drop-in sessions insisted that they were far from having any designs or artist impressions available to the community. However, artist impressions released today show that not one tree in Gandolfo Gardens will be preserved. I've also been told that this is partly due to the temporary extension of the tram depot and their parking requirements. Has the council had any response to preserving some of the trees in Gandolfo Gardens? And if not, can you please follow up with them?
Thank you. I'll just ask Joseph Tobacco to reply.
Vanessa, good evening. Thank you very much for your question. I'll probably start with the last question first and work my way backward. The council, like the community, was not consulted on the designs of the new stations which were published today through the media. This is the first time the council has seen those station designs, and like you, we're still coming to understand and appreciate the significant change which is likely to occur based on those concept plans. Council hasn't been provided with a rationale or an explanation from the state in relation to why an opportunity hasn't been afforded to the community in relation to those concept plans, particularly given that the consultation phase is set to conclude on Saturday of this week. Your questions in relation to the heritage assessment along the rail corridor, without stating the obvious, this is a Victorian government project through the corridor on Victorian government land, so the level of influence that council has in that regard is somewhat limited. To provide certainty in terms of the question that you've asked, has council conducted its own heritage assessment? Council hasn't conducted its own heritage assessment of the entire corridor itself. However, it does have a number of assessments that it has conducted in relation to heritage features right across the municipality. So we'd be eager to understand with the Victorian government how we can make sure that the heritage assets within the corridor, particularly the stations, are preserved, enhanced.
Council will be able to respond to the advertised permit that Heritage Victoria will be advertising fairly soon. So I would hope that the council is prepared for that in advance.
Oh, absolutely. There's certainly some certainty in providing that reassurance. It's probably important to note that the LXRP have sought approval from the Minister for Planning to make changes to the Moreland planning scheme to facilitate this particular project. The process is commonly used for infrastructure projects right across the state, so it's not unique to this particular project. The planning scheme amendment will apply to the land within the corridor and any adjacent land that may likely be used temporarily during the construction phase. And it incorporates site-specific controls via an incorporated document, which essentially means that the project can progress without the need for an additional planning permit, subject to conditions that they're being met to the satisfaction of the planning minister. And those conditions can include aspects including things like local heritage, urban design, and environmental management aspects.
Thank you.
Okay.
And is Nadia, have you got Nadia?
So the trees, if you've had a response on the Gandolfo Gardens as well?
Do you just want to repeat your question, just in relation to those?
Just if you've
Just to vegetation,
received a
yes.
response on the
Sure.
preservation of the trees.
Just the fact that the artist impressions from today show that there are no trees, show that the trees won't be preserved in Gandolfo Gardens.
Yeah.
Yes. Important to note, they appear to be labelled as concept plans at this particular point in time, so they're not detailed designs. Where council is currently working is to understand when an opportunity will be provided to the community to understand when the detailed designs will be available and how the community and council can influence those particular outcomes.
And
It is.
Joseph, sorry to interrupt you, but if we could just confirm whether we've had a response from the LXRP about the trees.
Sure. The categorical response is no. Council
Yes.
has not received a response from the LXRP.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Bolton?
Question to the director?
Yep.
Dr. Becker. Just in terms of council's submission to Heritage Victoria around the concept plans, is it likely to include things such as the usage of traditional heritage colours and visibility? Like at the moment, Moreland Station is visible from all the streets around it, and that's an important aspect of heritage, is that visibility of a heritage location through the whole. Like, is council submission likely to include those sorts of aspects?
I think it would be safe to say yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Nadia?
Good evening, everyone. I've also got two questions. Do you want me to go through both of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. They touch on the same topic, just probably on a more sort of individual personal level. I reside in the Mayor Anderson building, which is a big building right next to the Coburg station. My first question was, what will the council be doing to assist the residents of the Mayor Anderson building during the building phase and the aftermath of the level crossing removal? I suppose this comes in the light of the fact that we're right there, literally. And the second question is, what will the council be doing to assist me with the potential structural and other damage to my building, the loss of privacy, complete obstruction of sky view, natural light, as well as the noise and dust pollution that my level 1 apartment will suffer from, because at this stage the XRA has come up with nothing.
Thank you, Nadia.
Nadia, thank you for your question. At this current point in time, no detailed information in relation to the construction phase of the project has been provided to council, so I'm unable to indicate what the likely disruption is to be. Suffice to say that it will likely be significant given the scale of the project. So we would certainly be taking every action possible to provide updates to the community as that information becomes available. The other aspect to your question is what will council do to assist any likely or possible structural impacts to your premises. Council's role is one to advocate, so we'll be obviously working with the local community as we currently are to understand fully and to appreciate the issues and concerns, and to ask the LXRP to provide a response to the community, giving some reassurance about the likely supports that they can provide, or reassurances in relation to what's being proposed.
Yeah, and do you think that will be available prior to everything starting? Because it's happening within the next few months.
We would certainly be
We're still in the
making
dark.
every attempt to make sure that we are able to access that information well in advance.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Antonio Bonifacio. Thanks, Tony.
Where I live, I've been living there for a long time, and Essen Airport is really, it's taken toll on my health. The noise level is just unbelievable. It can happen any time from 1 o'clock in the morning, very early, till about 3:30, thereabouts 4 o'clock. It just goes on and on and on. Would council would suggest that I'm suggesting that they be able to submit us to something to the Essen Airport that they actually take care of the glass, so that it could have some soundproofing. I'm sure that they should be able to allocate something for the people that are really affected, because it has really affected me a lot. And I'm sure there's others out there that the same thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I just want to clarify with you, Tony, if that's okay. As part of the letter that is in the report that is in today's agenda, are you asking that we consider requesting an allocation of funds for soundproofing and that sort of thing?
Yes, I would, yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So
It's a matter that you could consider tonight.
Yep, yep. Is there anyone that would like to respond?
Can I just ask a question of Tony?
Of course.
You mentioned 1 a.m. It's supposed to have a curfew at midnight. It's not obeying its curfew?
Well, the sound comes through somehow. I don't know whether it's
right.
my house allocation
Okay.
or what it is, but it just, I can hear them. It just, I wake up and I just can't go to sleep. I have to,
I'd be interested
I have
to
to
know whether
actually be
it's keeping
sleeping
its
during the
curfew.
daytime to make up for it. And it's, my life is just ruined.
Thank Tony. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton?
I think we should take that on board and consider that when it comes to that report in the agenda tonight, because I think it's a very real issue. The residents in Broady have been fighting the same sort of thing with the expansion of the Melbourne airport, and it's a very common thing. Sydney had a big campaign in the 80s around aircraft noise, so it's a very real issue for people. So I think we should add something when it comes to that report.
When you don't sleep, when you don't get to sleep, you can't run the next day, and you're just not yourself anymore.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of the fact that we're already 10 minutes in and there's still quite a few questions to go. So it might have to be first in, best dressed to answering the questions, just because we have an astronomically long agenda this evening. Helen Kratzman.
Good evening, everyone. As a resident who lives next to a neighbourhood centre, I welcome the proposed parking changes in tonight's agenda. Many residents and businesses do not have off-street parking, and they rely on Moreland's permit system to provide turnover of vehicles in order for them or their customers to park their car. In saying that, there's a large residential development in our neighbourhood centre which predates the cut-off for permit eligibility, and I am concerned that in excess of 200 secondary permits are eligible to be provided under the proposed transitional measure. Not only would the vehicles simply not fit on the street, or even half of them, this proposed measure would open the gates to fraud via on-selling parking permits. And I'm wondering whether Moreland Council has considered this risk. A single permit for a resident's $36, a second permit if someone's eligible is $94. I didn't read the cost of the transitional permit, however the MITS parking transition report states that a visitor's ticket can be purchased for $12 a week or $665 a year, or to $322 concession. Where new residents are not eligible for a parking permit, there's certainly opportunity for residents to obtain financial benefit by on-selling these transitional permits at the expense of existing residents' amenity. Aside from proof of occupancy, what measures are Moreland Council going to implement to mitigate the risk of residents on-selling their residential parking permits? Has Moreland Council considered asking residents for a proof of vehicle registration or a letter of employment in the case of a company vehicle? Because June 2021 is 2 years away, and that's a long time for existing residents to have to fret about on-street parking capacity, which is something that the intent of this parking policy is meant to protect.
Thank you. You nailed it right on the second.
Yeah, thanks.
Again, you always do that.
I try.
So I'll ask you to answer this, please.
Thanks for the question, Helen. Under the current regime of parking permits, I'm not aware of any instances of the trading of parking permits at this point in time. So in terms of current and past practice, we're not aware of those practices going on. The report before council does provide for a greater amount of discretion to officers and to the CEO to consider unintended consequences of these changes. So it's through the report that will be considered tonight that we'll be able to have greater flexibility to address any unforeseen consequences of the new parking restrictions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Helen, I have a second question regarding Amendment C159.
Yep, thank you. Amendment C1569 is, sorry, that might be my writing in a rush, is regarding advertising club signage in open spaces. Prior to the upgrade of the pitch and pavilion at Campbell Reserve, our community expressed concern to Moreland Council about the development of this public land by a commercial sporting club. Campbell Reserve is Crown land, which is managed by Moreland Council, and it's pictured in the C169 panel report as a major facility. Whilst Moreland Council is committed to supporting sporting clubs, it is unfair to disregard the amenity of other park users, particularly in high-density neighbourhood centres. Many residents don't want to see advertising in our green spaces, and I note that I spoke to several residents last year who lived next to Campbell Reserve, and they advised they didn't receive notice about the consultation for this amendment. Speaking of consultation, our community requested consultation in relation to the upgrade of the pitch and pavilion at Campbell Reserve. You may recall me standing here requesting it. Proper consultation was never delivered by this council. Now people can't cut through the park to get to our local bus stop because the club have used zip ties to attach temporary fencing to the permanent fence, literally cutting off pedestrian access. When we use a playground, instead of looking out across a vast green open space, we have to look through a chicken wire fence to see the grass. By not requiring planning permit to install some categories of signage at Campbell Reserve, the commercial sporting club that dominates the land will be empowered to install signage on the northern perimeter fence. When residents met with council representatives about the development at Campbell Reserve, we negotiated in good faith and it was agreed that no signage would be installed on the north side of the pitch to protect the vista. What guarantees can Moreland Council provide to residents that signage will not be installed on the northern perimeter fence under this change? And if Moreland Council cannot keep to the agreement made with residents during that meeting, what recourse will residents have regarding the installation of commercial advertising on the northern perimeter fence in this public open space?
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you, Helen. In relation to the report before Council tonight, the report tonight deals with advertising signs and their approval under the planning scheme. There is a two-step process, though, for any sporting club to seek to install advertising signs on Crown land that's managed by Council. First of all, they need a consent from Council as the land manager, and it is that process that's vetted by Council officers whether or not a planning permit is required. So if there are signs that do not require a planning permit, which could be installed, they would still need consent of Council as the public land manager.
Thank you. Caroline, a question regarding the lighting at Richards Reserve.
Yes. Hello, good evening. Yeah, I'm here to raise a question for our community at the Richard Dog Park Reserve. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
Take your time.
So I'm a little bit of a background. We already have tabled a petition, as far as I'm aware of, as well. A motion has been done by Sue Bolton. Thank you for that. So my question is, when are the lighting getting installed? Simple question.
Well done. Graham? I'll just add that there's a part 2 which is about a possibility to install lights based on solar power.
Yeah, because if there is any budget issue, which you probably will have, so maybe solar panels are the solution.
Thank you.
Through the Mayor, thanks for the question, Caroline. There's a few things going on at Richard Reserve. There's also a budget submission about toilets at
Public
Richard
toilets,
Reserve.
yeah, I'm aware of that.
In addition to the NOM and the petition in regards to the lights within Richard Reserve. Within the Moreland Open Space Strategy, MOS, there's an action within that to undertake a redevelopment plan for Richard Reserve, and that's actually occurring in next financial year, and that will outline, the works that are required in that reserve, whether that be lighting, toilets, playgrounds, whatever it might be, following a consultation process. So at this stage, there's no funding to install lights, and there's no current time frame to install lights, but there is a commitment to undertake a redevelopment plan or a master plan for Richards Reserve that's out of our open space strategy, and that will occur in the next 12 months.
And when? Next 12 months?
The plan will be developed over the next 12 months or within the next 12
The
months.
developing of the plan. Okay.
Thank you. The next question is from Patricia Curry.
Hi there. My question relates to Gillen Oval and the cyclone mesh fence that had been removed recently. So when I contacted the council, I got a response from the recreation unit to say that the mesh fencing wasn't going to be replaced for a few reasons, and one of those being to manage the conflict between dog owners and active sports users of the ground. And then I received information about how actually the cyclone mesh fence removal was part of a trial. So I'm not sure whether or not it's not going to be replaced or it's part of a trial. But if it is part of a trial, my question is whether or not as dog owners we could be involved in the review of that trial to ensure whatever happens next, that the dog owners and their interests are considered. And then the second question is about the overall framework of the Moreland Sports and Recreation thing that I was kind of reading in the agenda, and whether or not we can also be, as a group, included in those discussions, because I feel like those discussions are heavily favoured or focused on official sports clubs.
Great, thank you. Adam?
Through you, Mayor. The conflict with dog owners and sporting grounds is a long-standing one.
Yeah.
And it's very contentious. It's very difficult to get an easy resolution at the first effort.
Sure.
So what we're doing is undertaking this trial for 12 months. We'll assess it during that period, and we'll think about assessment measures such as what's the level of complaint from either party, how much damage to the ground do we have to fix as a result of dogs jumping around, and other things like that. And certainly you can make your comments through that.
Will we be able to, I guess I'm saying I feel like the dog owners need a representation at those discussions. So we'll be able to be involved in those discussions like the sports clubs.
You touched on the last item in your question before.
Yeah.
On our agenda today is the draft recreation
Yeah.
strategy, active recreation strategy. If council endorses that, that'll go out for consultation for quite some weeks, and you could certainly make your views and other dog owners' views known through that process. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to clarify, in case it's not clear, Patricia, that strategy is a draft, so it goes out for submission, and there's a link on the council webpage that you can say, this is my submission, I think the dog owners need to be included, and then that gets taken back into consideration, and then the final report, which is the adopted strategy, which ultimately for your intents and purposes will include the reference about dog owners in the community, would be included. So what we can do is make a commitment to making sure that you receive a link, or you can look on our website to see the link, so that you're able, or the dog owners are able to make a submission to the draft strategy.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I've now got 3 questions that are all related to the LXRP. James Conlon, Jack Amatidis, is that right? And Pauline Galvin. So either or, all, feel free to come forward.
I'm James, and I'm a representative of the recently formed Moreland Level Crossing Removal Community Action Group. Just rolls off the tongue. So we are a broad coalition of people who formed recently in response to the level crossing removal project, and we're very concerned about obviously the consultation process which has been mentioned tonight, as well as the outcomes that doesn't look like they're going to deliver what the community wants. So recently we held a community meeting with 80 people from the local area, and we formed a vision document together, coming up with a list of wishes and demands as part of this project, and we all agreed to that document. And I'm here tonight to thank Council for supporting us so far in the efforts that we've done, and there was a few councillors there on the day. And my question is whether Council will, provide in principle support to our community vision document. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, James. I'm happy to answer this because there's a few questions on the same topic, and I think a few people probably want to speak to it as well. But from my perspective, I'd like to commend the fact that, well, I'd like to acknowledge that not everyone's in the tent, but nearly everyone is in the tent on this, and commend that a very broad collection of people have managed to come to a united position. And yes, in principle, I support it. There are things that I think won't fly with LXRP, and what's happened today probably talks to that as well. But it will be considered later on in the agenda. So, Jack? Yep.
Good evening to all. I hope you can hear me. My name's Jack. I've lived in the municipality for over 31 years, and I just saw the public announcement today, and I just want to say, for over 31 years living in the community, I'm very, very happy and commend the council for the broad headline: no consultation on Coburg and Moreland station designs leaves council disappointed. So I'm grateful that I can see some backbone in the council, and thank you for that. So you're commended on that. There's a couple, I'm just going to go down the line there. It says, I encourage members of our community to provide feedback and voice for the concerns to the state government and the LXRP, the councillor Mayor said. So I just would like to tell you, I'm leading up to the question. I know I've got 2 minutes. So we met with the federal member, Peter Khalil, and Tim Reid, the state member, and they all encouraged us to write into the Minister for Jacinta Allen, Transport Minister, and also to the Brax, Premier Daniel. Brax, I said Brax, Daniel. Goes back a long time. But so we did write to Daniel Andrews and Jacinta Allen. I'm not going to read you, I'm just going to read you 1 or 2 sentences. We said, I'm also here on behalf of the Bug. I'm a member of the Bug group. And I said to them, the words that we put together with the convener of the Bug and also the deputy convener. We said there's an article that we actually attached, which was from the Kingston Council, and how much effort went into the consultation process at Kingston and the outcome that they got for those 2 level crossings, and they were underground. And we just said we have attached a news article discussing how it actually, if you consult with the community and the local council, including members of state parliament, federal parliament, you get a good outcome. So consultation is urgent in this respect, and that we want all to contribute. And the most important thing that we said when we drafted this letter is that for the 2 level crossings removal projects proposed at Bell Street and Moreland Road, a similar collaborative effort is required in order to achieve the best possible outcome. So we want the best outcome for our community and to work together. And we said the options we choose now for the 2 level projects at Bell Street and Moreland Road have a lasting impact, not just on the current generation, but future generations as well. So what we do here is very, very important. So consultation is imperative. So I'm not going to go into the consultation.
I'm going to need a question, Jack,
yes,
sorry.
Yeah, so I'm leading up to the reason why it's all consultation. My question is, what are the next steps by council regarding consultation of the 2 crossing removals at Moreland Station and Coburg Station? Just like to know what the next steps by council is. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there a councillor that would like to answer the question? Joseph?
Thanks for your question. The short answer is that, to our understanding and to the community's understanding, the consultation period concludes at 5 p.m. on Saturday through the LXRP website. We're hopeful to be receiving some information from the LXRP in relation to the outcomes of the consultation, in terms of where things have landed and what the next steps are. At this current point in time, I'm not sure I can answer your question in any more detailed format than that.
So,
Thank you.
in relation to that, is it fair that we only have 2 days remaining until Saturday, seeing that the concept plans for the stations came out today? Is that an adequate time, the 2 days, for a community to respond and for councillors to respond back to the proposals?
Okay, so I think that is a question that is not for us, because that's not something that council has control over. We didn't know the plans were coming. None of us were at the launch, to my knowledge. I wasn't there. I didn't even know it was happening.
Yeah.
Or whatever that is, an announcement. And because I know that we could talk about this for an hour, because we have, I think what I'll do is get Pauline to come forward and ask her question, and we will be addressing this later in the meeting. Thank you. I need to ask for an extension of time, please, councillors. Councillor Bolton? I'm happy.
To deal with the ones that are on the agenda?
There is one more which addresses something that's on the agenda.
And there's 3 that are not on the agenda that are to do with particular urgent.
What are the 3 that are not on the agenda?
That's okay.
No, I was just saying to deal with a potential urgent business item, so.
Okay, yeah.
So Councillor Bolton and
I'm happy to second it.
Councillor Kavanagh are seconding. So all those in favour of extending question time by 30 minutes, against, declare that carried. Pauline, thank you.
Hello, my name's Pauline Galvin. I'm a community member that's been involved with the getting together to have a community say and input into the level crossing removal that we are receiving. So I'd like to also thank the council for the support that the community has received in our efforts to liaise and consult with the LXRP. And so one of the key things that came out of our community meeting, there were a number of key issues that really were very important for everybody, and the vegetation along the entire upfield transport corridor and the Gandolfo Gardens and the other mature vegetation around particularly Moreland station, but also the entire length of the that urban forest along that transport corridor. So my question is, what will the council be doing to ongoing future consultation and advocacy for protecting the vegetation along that corridor, both during the design and the construction phase of the level crossing removals?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph, is there a councillor that would like to respond? Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to respond. I mean, there is some negotiation going on, or attempts at negotiation or lobbying, I guess, by council of LXRP, which really, as far as I can tell, hasn't really got us very far. And I actually firmly believe that we need some community action around the green spaces to put some public pressure on LXRP in addition to whatever the council's doing. And then also, I think the council needs to back the residents by taking strong positions in council meetings to back the residents. I think that's the only way we're going to win on some of these issues, and probably ditto on heritage and a range of the amenity issues affecting residents. We need that two-pronged approach. I think, that's what's won us some various other things in Moreland. We haven't always been successful in that, but I think the fact that LXRP has come out with designs, they told the consultation 2 weeks ago there were no designs, then suddenly they spring this on the community, basically means the whole consultation process is a total charade. It's a total farce. And so I think we need to ramp up the community action, and I think it's good that some of the different groups which might not agree on absolutely everything have come together to work together to fight around the various issues, from amenity to heritage to cycling to public transport, is a very good step forward, and I think we need to further that process. Council needs to back it. Absolutely, we need to back the community on those things with a strong stance, but we also need to build up that public pressure.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. just like to add that council has supported and will continue to support, regardless of what that looks like, the work and intention of the group, and the outcomes that all of us want for that line that we all live very close to. So I think it's important to note that this has come as much of a shock to any of us as it has to the community, and most, if not all of us, and all three levels of local government in the neighbourhood were at that consultation that looked like it was going swimmingly. You know, there was over 100 people involved in the consultation, and then the smaller group that got together and got a centralised position. So there's never been any kind of rhetoric from this council group that said, no, we don't support the work that you're doing. So, and, you know, council officers being involved. So I guess I want to reiterate what Councillor Bolton has said from the perspective of support for outcomes over there. John Englert, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I'm John Englert, and tonight I'm wearing my hat as convener of Climate Action Moreland. I have two questions on separate agenda items. The first one arises from the governance report, and particularly the ESD Annual Achievements Report and the Urban Heat Island Effect. So I'll get straight to the point. Can the Mayor or Council officers explain what urban cooling initiatives were advocated by the ESD Department for the level crossing removal project, and what was the response by the level crossing removal project to those initiatives? They weren't actually detailed in the governance report. That's why I'm asking them this question now.
Thank you, John. Joseph?
Thanks for your question, John. Unfortunately, my response may be very similar to some of the other responses I've provided tonight. What we have done is provide the Victorian Government with Council's policy positions in relation to a whole range of its activities and its responsibilities. What we haven't received from the LXRP at this point in time is any detailed information around what ESD considerations are going to feature through the new station precincts as well as the rail corridor itself.
Thank you. And the second question, John?
My second question relates to the state purchasing contract for the provision of natural gas for large sites. Now, gas is problematic as a transition fuel and generates fugitive emissions all along from extraction to when it's burnt. Given we have a climate emergency and need to transition off all fossil fuels, can the Mayor or council officers advise what measures are being taken and in what time frame for council to transition away from gas heating for the Brunswick, Coburg and Fawkner leisure centres? And I'd like to preface this that 2 years ago, I fully electrified my house, moved off gas hot water system and gas cooking. So I think we all need to do this transition, and I'm asking what council's doing in regards to gas heating.
Thank you, John. I'd just like you to know that we've had the gas disconnected at our house, so you can pretend you were the inspiration if you like. And I'll hand over to Phil to answer the question about the pools, which is not one I can answer.
Thank you, John, and thanks for the question. I can't specifically answer the timeframe at this stage or the measures in relation to the recreational services. What I can say is that Council has adopted a zero carbon framework through to 2040, and at the April meeting, 10th of April meeting, resolved the first 5-year action plan of that zero carbon framework to proceed to public consultation from, through until September, so from that date through till September. So Council will be consulting with the community and other partners around measures to achieve zero carbon, and particularly within this next 5-year period, but we would welcome submissions in relation to these matters as part of that consultation process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, so I now have 4 questions that are all relating to the PTV substation at Reynard Street. And they're from Dan, Carmel, Sam and Maria. And it's really up to you. There's about 20 minutes. So who would like to come forward?
Okay, yep. Hi, I'm Dan, and I'm a very concerned citizen about the proposed substation on Reynard Street, Pescoville South. And I'm sure most council members and officers have received quite a bit of communication. I've kind of come in here, and there's a lot of good people who've worked long and hard behind the scenes, so I'm sort of jumping in, but I'll get directly to the point and the question. In the interest of community safety, property value, primary students' health, why is the council not seriously considering the relocation of the PT Victoria substation in Reynard Street, Pescoville South, to an appropriate location such as Shore Reserve?
Thank you. Are there any councillors that would like to answer this question? Councillor Bolton, sorry.
I believe there is a proposal for an urgent business item along these lines. It will be up to the councillors whether they agree to let that be put. And the idea of that urgent business item is that so all alternatives to the alternative locations can be looked at within the time frame that that urgent business item is required tonight to allow that option to be examined as one of several options that are being looked at for relocation. Because I gather there's some urgency with this project, which I only discovered recently, that PTV is wanting to push ahead so that the substation is ready by the time the level crossing removals start, because there'll be an extra load on the trams at that point. So that's why this urgent business item will be attempted to be moved tonight, but it will be up to the councillors whether they allow it to be moved.
Okay, just a quick follow-up, very quickly.
Sure.
What sort of time frame are we talking about, Sue, councillor?
Better to defer to the CEO on that.
Okay, so just through the mayor, and you'll have to bear with me with my voice. So last council meeting, there was a notice of motion that asked us to speak to PTV about kind of freezing the time frame on this project to enable alternative sites to be considered. That has happened. We made the approach to PTV. They agreed to freeze that, but they can only do it until the 24th of June is really what 24th of June is what they nominated for us to try and find some alternative. Now, since then, what we have been doing as officers is scouring within the boundaries of their technical spec what other sites could exist. So we have been doing that through our property area. I met with their CEO yesterday specifically to continue advancing that discussion. And there should have been an email that would have gone out today, post that meeting yesterday, to let you know that we have been having that discussion with PTV. They also, part of what we were instructed to do as part of the last council meeting was to seek some more technical information from PTV so that we can get our heads around the safety measures that would be employed here. And council also authorised us to appoint an independent expert who then, separate to anybody, basically can assess what is being provided by PTV and to peer review that. And as per yesterday's meeting, we understand now also that the information has come through and we should get that later this week. We'll get that peer review done later this week. So they're the timeframes. There ought to, I think, should have been an email out to a number of residents, and I know there was a phone call, I think, through to one resident today, and that was simply just to let you know, given that the meeting happened yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
No
I think
worries.
I've used up my time.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Before I get started on the topic, just something Sue mentioned earlier about charades and community consultation. It's kind of a common theme here. There seems to be a lot of apparent community consultation that gets discussed, but no actual consultation. So my question, well, firstly, so at the May meeting, as we've touched on, it appeared council was finally listening. However, it was only today that we received any form of an update from the council. And that was a phone call to myself, followed by an email to some residents. I did not receive the email myself, which I'm surprised about considering I think I've sent quite a number of emails to everyone at the council. So yet it didn't come to me, but they did call. Given this query, my query was around the timeline of when council sought information and when they received responses. Now, you've kind of mentioned a few of these things. I just find it sort of, well, does the council consider it acceptable that we had an update today, just hours before this meeting, when we've been seeking support since February, and this is the third meeting we are now all in attendance to try and get some help. And it sort of seems that at the last meeting we had no response up until we got here. We had one email. Today I received a phone call at lunchtime. You know, it's been a month, and we were told today that it's only on hold till the 24th of June. So given the urgency, I think the council obviously knew a week ago some answers before the meeting yesterday. Is it acceptable?
So just through the Mayor, I'll respond to that. So after the council meeting last week, so the council meeting was very clear about what we were being asked to do. The letter went out within a day or two, so it wasn't as though people sat on that. It went to PTV. I can't remember what day their response came to basically say, okay, well, we'll hold it for a number of weeks to allow us to have this discussion. And basically it has been the last 2 weeks of work of trying to find other sites. That's what officers have been doing. When I met with CEO yesterday, I gave an update to my council last night at the briefing, and then an update provided to you the next day. So, you know, we gave you an update as soon as we had information. It is not designed to do anything other than to basically invite you in and let you know what's going on. Part of, I think, what was communicated today as well is, given that we have on board the specialist and given that he'll be doing his peer review and finishing it this week, the invitation is to actually come in and sit down with this specialist so that you can get the information directly from him and ask your questions directly. Yep. And the whole point of that is so that you're someone independent of everybody who then is accessible to you. So that's the intent. If it's come across in a different way, that, you know, no one is intending that, but the timeframes are very tight and we're working as quickly as we can.
Yep. But the thing that I've got a follow-up question, but also coming back to that in terms of the response and that the peer review is now being undertaken. I was told today that you've only actually received concept drawings, so you still haven't got full detailed.
That's right.
Plans of the internal layout, the setbacks, the details, or any details about noise being reviewed. So, I mean, how long is this going to drag on, considering they've only given us a couple, 12 more days? So my actual follow-up question is, you know, with all this the council is doing, will the council then be turning its back on the people they're here to support by allowing PDVs to simply proceed with the current site if the last alternative is just not possible? Because we were told that you've exhausted most options and that there's only one possible site left. So, you know, why is that the case? And will council just be turning its back on us and not saying, guess what, we have land available at Shore Reserve that's in a spot that's away from everything else, and it's not that, you know, it's next to an existing substation, which we keep mentioning, you know, is that what's going to happen?
So I can respond to part of that, which is the part around the detailed design. So there isn't a detailed design yet. There's a concept design, and there's the reports on the emissions that are expected to be generated from that machinery. So there's that and concept design. There won't be a detailed design right now. It won't be here now. The peer review that is being done is to get across the emissions information that they're providing, and also to see what are the things that they are proposing or can propose to make sure these emissions are contained, and basically providing peer review on what they give us. The solutions to it are developed in the detail design, and they're just not up to that yet. Now, I can't make them go any faster, and your view about what council can allow, just to reiterate, it's not in my power to say you can't do this project at this point. I can't ring them and force them to do it a certain way. What we are trying to do is get the independent person basically to review what they're providing and to get the information from them. So that's just the situation.
So this review won't be complete
Sorry,
though in terms of the motion?
I can't, there's two more questions to be asked. Yep. Sorry, I know this is not what you really want to have happen, but it doesn't work in the format of a discussion. Yeah. Yep. So I've got Carmel and, did you want to say something, John?
No.
I've got Carmel and Sam also to ask a question. We've got about 8 minutes left.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Carmel Locchiano, and I live next door to the proposed substation, as some of you know. My question is, how can the council agree to PTV's project considering its location 20 centimetres away from my home, my family home, when APANZA clearly states 5 to 10 metres is a buffer zone? That is my concern. You need to come to my house and you need to have a look at this. We live on that side where they want to build this substation. I am just beside myself that we are not getting any help, because once the 24th of June comes, what's going to happen? If they say everything's fine, are they going to build? It's only, 2 weeks to go? What can I say? I'm just... we need help. We need you guys to help us, because I don't know where to go anymore. It's not fair. It's not fair, because this is ridiculous. And I need you guys to help me. Sorry. I need help. We need to stop this and we need to relocate it, because building next door to my house is not an option. It's not. Please, someone needs to help us.
So, Carmel, I've got the question written here. How can council agree to PTV project considering its location? Would you like me to ask the councillors that question, if anyone would like to answer the question? Councillor Bolton?
I think at least some of us want to see the substation moved. We don't think the location is acceptable for the substation, just 20 metres away from your home. 20 centimetres, away from your home, and especially being located right beside where your bedrooms are, including your son's bedroom. And I certainly want to see the substation relocated, and hopefully there will be support for considering this urgent business item later in the agenda.
Thank you. Sam, did you want to come forward and ask your question as well?
My questions have already been answered.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so councillors, we'll now move on to the reports. And I have a list of actually, just a second. I've got the next item is on notice responses. So I'd like to point out that on notice responses are now reported through the governance report to be considered later this evening. And
Madam Mayor, can I, Natalie?
Yes.
Can I also perhaps suggest that we move some of the items forward, especially perhaps that...
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I might just wait for the CEO to come back into the room. So I've got a list of potential items that can be moved en bloc, and I circulated that this afternoon. So if there are any councillors that have a reason why any of those items that I propose be moved en bloc be pulled out of that block, then what we might do is just consider moving them all together. Let me just find
The email at 5:48.
Thank you. Good. Okay. So DCF 3919, better planning and development outcomes through additional urban design resources. DCF 4119, proactive planning enforcement and improved planning services council action plan item. DEP 519, redevelopment of 33 Saxon Street update. EMF 2119, financial management report for the period ended 30th of April 2019. And DBT 1219, which is the governance report for June 2019.
I so move.
Thank you.
I'll have to second.
So Councillor Tapanos has moved that and Councillor Yildiz has seconded that. Is there any debate? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. So we've now had... Is everything okay, Councillor? Yeah, right. So I've had a request that the urgent business item be brought forward.
Yep, so it would need to be added to the agenda first.
Yes, yep.
Which urgent business item?
Yeah. So, which one? There are two.
The public transport PTV substation.
Okay, so the first thing that we need to do
is added to the agenda, yeah?
is we need to vote on whether it's urgent business. So I need a motion to admit, let me just find in my notes here.
So that council admit urgent business item submission.
PTV substation.
Yep.
And it's moved by Councillor Yildiz and seconded by Councillor Bolton. And would you like to speak to it, Councillor Yildiz?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you like me to read out the motion?
This is just to bring it to the meeting.
No, there's no need to speak. It's
No?
obviously
Okay.
the reason why it's an urgent item is pretty obvious.
Right, so we'll put this to the vote, that this urgent business item PTV substation be...
Why it should be urgent business?
Yeah.
What should be admitted?
Yep, sorry, Councillor Yildiz didn't want to speak to it, so but I didn't ask you. But
So what I'm saying is we're voting to actually include this as an urgent business item first.
Yep.
And then we put the motion up. So
I was going to argue why it should be admitted.
Yep,
as a
sure.
urgent
What's the
business.
Go for it.
Well, I think it is urgent because we heard from the CEO that we've got a deadline of, or the PTV is only prepared to freeze this project till the 24th of June. So this, and this is information which was only, we've become aware of last night, so it's since the last council meeting. So that means it is justified as urgent business. Our next July meeting will obviously be after the deadline of the 24th of June. I think the impact on this family of not shifting this substation is just too extreme. And I think we should have all options on the table, and this motion, which is being put forward tonight, is to enable us to have the time to explore every single option.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this becoming an urgent business item? So I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. So what we have agreed to do is admit the PTV substation motion as urgent business, and we'll address it now. So my notes, I think, have been updated, but Councillor Yildiz, I believe that you're putting this motion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
And I'll just get you a seconder, please.
Yep.
Councillor Bolton is seconding. So Councillor Yildiz asks that you please start by stating the motion and then provide a brief background.
So that council conducts community consultation on the proposal to locate the PTV substation at Shaw Reserve and presents a council report to the July meeting, which will allow council to determine if will offer Shaw Reserve to PTV as a site for the new substation. So that's what the motion reads. I'm happy to speak to it.
Yep, you can speak to it because you have a
Well, look,
seconder.
I mean, it is, I do appreciate the councillors agreeing to include this as an urgent business item because it is. The consultation process has been rushed. A lot of you haven't had that communication that you really should have had. And I think because of the fact that I think PTV are doing, let's just be honest here, I think the way that they've conducted this whole entire process has been very ordinary. And as Councillor Bolton was saying, I mean, all along, and I think councillors have heard this time and time again, the gallery's heard this time and time again, that site is not suitable, not just for Carmel and her family, but also for those residents that abut that site currently and anyone that lives near that proposal at the moment. The most convenient place to put it is Shore Reserve. There is already a substation there. It just makes sense to put this next to it. And I'm going to urge the councillors, please, you can't destroy the lives of those people that have bought homes there 40, 50, 60 years ago to turn around and put something that they never expected it to be right next to their home. And I'm also a bit surprised that councillors, in fact, haven't gone to visit Carmel's home because it is literally 20 centimetres away from her son's bedroom and their entire home. But you've heard this all before. I'm hoping that councillors will tonight vote for this to be relocated to Shore Reserve. Let's not beat around the bush, because if it's not going to be at Shore Reserve, we all know what the outcome's going to be. It'll be exactly where it is currently, and unfortunately you're not going to get enough time to consider selling your home. And no one's probably going to want to buy there anyway. So I think, I really do urge councillors, please, we're here to represent the residents. We've been voted in to represent the residents. We need to do this as ethically and as honestly as we can tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Bolton?
I support this motion. I'm seconding the motion. While my first preference wouldn't necessarily be Shore Reserve, I think this, I'd rather a more industrial kind of commercial kind of area rather than Shore Reserve. But I have visited Carmel's home. I've seen how close this is. It is anyone who goes past your home and is aware that that's where the substation is planned to be located is shocked with how the proximity, 20 centimetres away, two brick walls, 20 centimetres away, just, that wide between the two. And especially given that your son has a disability and will be affected or likely to be affected by the emissions of the substation. So I think this purpose of this proposal is, or this urgent business item, is to enable council to have adequate time for doing some consultation about locating it in Shore Reserve. It would be, I gather, a lot bigger than the existing substation, like a lot bigger. And there are obviously residents living around Shore Reserve as well. So all of that has to be taken into account. But I think if we don't pass this tonight, it means we can't even really consider this option. So we need to have some consultation in order to allow us to make a final decision at the July meeting about this substation. But I'm firmly of the opinion that it should not be located where it is. I do not believe that it's safe. I think we did make some progress with the last council resolution, and I think I'm glad that there is going to be this expert review. But I think this absolutely needs to be removed from this particular location. And there are, there's one site that council sort of trying to interest PTV in, I gather, that, we think might be suitable, but that also, that might not work out as well. So I think we need to allow this, even though it's not my favourite option to suggest Shore Reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? Yeah. Councillor Kavanagh?
I wasn't at the last council meeting, but I did watch it live and I would have supported all those motions. But I'm not going to support this motion. In 2006, Melbourne Water did the largest infrastructure project ever in the northern suburbs with the Northern Sewerage Project. At the time, they needed an enormous workshed against the Moonee Ponds Creek opposite Bass Street. At the end of that, they then required an enormous substation to be placed on the creek, adjacent to the creek bed. And the owners of number 511 Pascoe Vale Road, who also owned the adjoining property of 509, said, I know this is going to impact our family life, but we would prefer it on the property next door to us rather than take the creek bed that is so valued to all the people in the local area. You know, I drove past that today. It's 11 years since that substation was built, and there hasn't been one issue since it's been built. And it's an enormous facility. It's worth having a look at 509 Pascoe Vale Road. When I sit around this council table, yes, I can understand that it's easy when you've got a group of residents who are very concerned, etc. But I see myself as a custodian of the public open space of this city. I see that as my role, as nurturing a community asset, a public asset, an asset that has been for generations important to the community. And so I see councillors as part of their role as custodians of that. And therefore, I won't allow such a facility to build on public open space, which is managed by Moreland City Council. I won't allow that, since therefore I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor in favour? Councillor Tapnos?
Thank you. Firstly, can I just say that it's very disappointing to hear the news about PTV trying to move on this on the 24th of June. And I know that this issue has been going around for many months now, but really in the last month, since we've moved those motions, we have started to get better communication with PTV, and we've started to see some movement. So motions do matter. What happens in this chamber does matter. And for that reason, I think we should support this motion, first and foremost because it may actually allow us a bit more time. What this motion actually says is, give us until the July meeting at least to make a decision. Push back the 24th of June to the July meeting at least. And I think that's important to buy that extra time. That time should not be wasted. We talk about consultation and it's been poor. And we've heard it from in regards to PTV, we've heard it in regards to Alex P. But we should not follow their example and actually do proper consultation. We shouldn't presume that there would be mass outrage if this is at Shore Reserve. Many of our parks have substations. In fact, Shore Reserve has an existing substation. It is right, and I think it's our obligation to undertake that consultation and then make a decision in July with all of the information present. So that's all that this is. It's saying, let's buy some time, let's undertake the consultation, let's see what the community says, and let's make an informed decision in July. Now, there would be pros and cons. There always are. For me, the location which is being proposed, 20 centimetres from someone's bedroom, is completely unacceptable. It is the worst possible location. But I'm sure that we can make Shore Reserve work, and I'm sure we can actually buy some time to look at some other sites as well. So I think that this is a really important motion tonight because of the message it will send. If you don't want to see it at Shore Reserve, that's fine. Vote against it in July. But don't block this motion today. That will buy us that time. That would allow us to do that extra work and allow the community to have its representatives to make that decision here in the chamber in a month's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapnos. I won't be supporting the motion this evening. I'm not quite sure why, considering the public consultation was on the 3rd of April, it's taken this long for this motion to come to the chamber. And this issue has been already to 2 meetings and this is its 3rd meeting. And my issue is, aside from what I think will be the inevitable impact on the park and the fact that the existing substation is about 1/8 of the size of what's being proposed with this substation. I'm really concerned about the fact that we're potentially leaving a 2-week window for consultation over something that last time we decided to put something in a park was the birth of the sweary email for me. And I didn't send it, I received it. And I don't think that, considering that was a toilet block, people in the community are going to take well to being given 2 weeks to let us know whether we can put a 120 square metre substation. Well, we wouldn't be putting it, PTV would be putting it there. So I support the original position of not putting it in the park. I did support the idea of putting it somewhere else. I'm not saying I think it should be next to the Locchiano's house, but I can't accept this last minute notion to have a whiz-bang quick consultation and engagement, considering one of the goals of the council plan was to improve the way we engage with the community. And so potentially if this had have happened 2.5 months ago, I would have had no issue with it whatsoever, but it's been flagged in the 11th hour as an urgent business item, and I just am not comfortable with it. And I understand that that won't make me popular, but I won't be supporting Councillor Bolton and Councillor Yildiz motion this evening. Are there any councillors in favour? Councillor Farnley?
Good evening, residents. Oh, look, I get quite upset when I hear residents saying that their council isn't sticking up for them and they're listening to them. It isn't right. In regards to your comments, Chair, in terms of why it's coming up so late, we got feedback from the CEO last night in terms of no other alternative site is realistic. And so when that is the case, so last month we were all fairly supportive of finding an alternative site. I think we're all on the same page there. And last night we got feedback that it's becoming really unrealistic that there is another alternative site other than Shore Reserve. Then you need to make the hard decision as a councillor of what do you prefer. And I can't get past that question. I think it was asked at last meeting. How would you feel if this was built next to your house? And I feel I'm really uncomfortable. I would not like that next to my house. I mean, I live with my grandmother. I wouldn't like it near her house. It's unacceptable. And you have to make the hard decision at the end of the day. If the alternative is Shore Reserve, then that is the alternative. And so I'm supportive of this motion. The other thing that this motion actually addresses is let's look at all available options. By being silent tonight and not coming up with an alternative site to PTV by the 24th of June, then PTV will say, well, you haven't come up with an alternative site. The only site that we can build now is the existing site that's been identified next to your house. So that to me signals the wrong, it gives PTV the wrong signal. You should be giving PTV a signal that says we are exploring all options, including Shore Reserve. Now on the issue of is it acceptable to have 2-week consultation with residents on whether we should locate this at Shore Reserve, it's not fair and it's not right. I accept that. But some consultation is better than no consultation. Let's actually go to the community. Let's not make the assumption that they would be dead against it having being at Shore Reserve. And if there were 100 residents in here complaining about Shore Reserve, then we have to make the hard call at that time as well. At this stage, I'm more comfortable with the substation being at Shore Reserve than I am in its current location in a residential area because I'm not comfortable with the effects it will have on the residents and also on supporting the mood of the residents to actually relocate this to another area. I've been patient. I've waited for the council officer staff to find alternative staff. It's been clear to me that there isn't an alternative location. If that's the case, then we have to make the hard call. If you vote against this, then essentially you're saying that you're comfortable with this substation going with where PTV has proposed it.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any councillors that would speak against? Yep.
Councillor Erfan raised a really good point there, and he said that nobody really has come forward complaining about Shore Reserve. I mean, the residents have got a supporting letter from the West Coburg Football Club saying they've got no issue with it. They're only probably 30 metres away from the current substation that's already there. But to suggest that if we had moved this 2 months ago, We may have, in fact, voted for it to go at Shore Reserve. I don't buy that, because I think you're always going to vote against this, because I understand where you're coming from too, Mayor, the fact that it is going to be in an open space area. But there's already a substation there. It's not as though we're creating something and setting a precedent. There's already one there. But to have it next door to homes where people have called it their home for 50, 60 years, and tonight a new gentleman, Dan, I see him. I see Maria and her husband here all the time, Carmel and her family, and everyone else that's here. These are people that keep coming all the time. I haven't seen one person walk into this chamber and go, we object to it going at Shore Reserve, when they would have heard what's going on weeks and months ago. And I'd also want to commend Councillor Tapnos in particular. Want to commend Councillor Erfungler and Councillor Sue Bolton, because we know what you're going through. And the fact that he mentioned it again, that if this was our home, would we want it next to us? We wouldn't. Empathetically, I really do share your frustration. And if it doesn't get up, I just want you to know that we've tried everything we possibly can to support you guys in this. And I appreciate you all coming here, meeting after meeting, phone call after phone call, text message after text message, and all those emails. Thank you. I mean, on behalf of those councillors that will hopefully support this, we've done everything we possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That's lost with the casting vote of the Mayor, I'm afraid.
Part of the vision.
Yep. So all those in favour? Yildiz, Tapanos, Erfungler, Dorney and Bolton? Against? Martin, Kavanagh, Abood, Riley and Davidson. Thank you.
Councillor Abood, can I call for a 5?
No. What was that, sorry?
5-minute recess. Can I just call for a 5-minute recess, please?
Procedural.
It's a procedural.
Yeah, we have a very long agenda this evening. Okay, so I'm now move to the next report, which is DCF 3819, the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, Parking and Implementation Approach and Principles, Council Action Plan D19 176204. Can I have, Councillor Erfungler?
Isn't the other one first, the Capital Works Program first?
Oh, sorry, I've written all over it, that's a problem. Sorry, DCF 3719, Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy 10-Year Capital Works Program for Pedestrians and Cyclists, Advocacy Plan. So, thank you, Councillor Erfungler.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move this motion, but with some additional points and alternatives, which I believe were circulated by the Director earlier this evening. Maybe we want to just go straight to those points, just to make it clear for those playing along at home.
Yep.
Yeah, they are. What do you got?
Invisible ink. Byfield, circulated Byfield.
So I believe was there a third one? I think there was one from Councillor Dord. I just want to move everything on block. Yeah. You don't have like that?
I've got my words if you need to.
We'll just give
them some time.
A chance to catch up because it's needs to be managed.
So there's an overlap, is there?
Yeah.
Which one's an overlap? There's no overlap. Yeah, I'd like to move them all on block. And if I have a second, I'm happy to speak to it. Sorry, did you want some clarity?
Yeah, just if we're able to scroll down.
Yeah, thank you.
Just bear with me. Yeah. So the alternatives that have been presented is to bring forward the two $10,000 projects that were in Fawkner to next year. And then I think we have an amendment from Councillor Bolton regarding, sorry, just got a bit too fast for me.
Oh, meaningful engagement. It's a great idea. Consultation, all for it.
Perhaps if I could second your alternative, and then we can ask the other councillors to explain their.
Well, why don't we just do it on block, because it's not too far away. That's all right. Are you done? Yeah, cool. So I'll just keep going through. So then we've got an alternative regarding the advocacy for the Transport Advocacy Plan. A number of alternatives, one presented from Councillor Bolton, one from Dorney. These are additional points to the report. And if you keep going, Jody. And then we're adding some additional commentary regarding the need for improved, in the advocacy plan, improved for linkage between Glenroy and Fawkner from Councillor Bolton. And if you keep going, Jody. And that was it. That was it. That was for alternatives. It was circulated by the director earlier today in a table.
And that was from Phil, was it?
Yes.
Okay, good. So it's all in a table if anyone needs to have a look at it for reference.
Well, okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Do I have a second, Dave? All right, great.
Thank you. Councillor, finally, feel free to speak to the motion.
Thank you. The report outlines the proposed capital work infrastructure for pedestrians, capital work infrastructure for cyclists, and our advocacy plan for mode shift beyond to the state government. The report's been generated mostly off the back of the consultation that's occurred during the MITS, and I believe obviously some additional points have come through following the post-MITS consultation as well. I'm quite comfortable with the report in terms of it lays out exactly what our 10-year projects are. It's a good opportunity for us to then also refocus on what we want from an advocacy perspective to the state government. Once you have a plan, obviously the state government can then clearly take a look at that and get behind projects that line up with both the state government and the council. A good example of that is obviously the extension of the upfield rail that occurred late last year. A lot of strategy work went into it. The state government had clear clarity on it, and then off the back of that, they were happy to invest in that particular project and meet the council halfway. In this instance, the state government will be seeing a hell of a lot of strategy work that has gone into the MITS and all the projects that we've laid out over 10 years, and I'm comfortable and hopeful that it gets endorsed by council tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Farnley. Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to speak in favour of this, and I certainly support the idea of bringing forward some of the Fawkner projects further forward, because the original proposal was that these would be sort of 5 years out or something of that order out. There is, as a lot of people know, the public transport in Fawkner is very poor, and cycling infrastructure has been, almost non-existent apart from the uphill bike path. So I think, and there's a lot more people cycling in Fawkner, so there's a lot more traffic in Fawkner with all the developments, so there's a real need for safer cycling paths in Fawkner in particular, and through Fawkner and in connection with the uphill bike path. The extra point that I made, which is not ready to, put into the budget or into the timeline as a project, but is more exploratory, is the linkage. There are linkages between Glenroy and Fawkner. Like, for instance, Merri Health often sends people, physiotherapy patients from Glenroy to the Fawkner Leisure Centre to do hydrotherapy, but there's no public transport link from the Glenroy shops to Fawkner shops or Fawkner Leisure Centre. The bus stops at Gary Station, and I know there's a range of people in Glenroy who access the Fawkner Community House, and possibly other people as well, there's a lot of connection between those communities that needs to be explored. And then I'd like to speak to my last element, which is around the public transport advocacy, where I felt that the original proposal that's in the agenda was a bit not strong enough on some of the points. I'd like to still see things even stronger than these amendments, but I think we need to sufficiently recognise the impact on people in the north of the trains being terminated at Bell Street. And I know in the media coverage of issues on the Upfill line, the media coverage has all just been about the infrequent service, not the fact that there is no alternative direct public transport route from Fawkner or Upfield further north into the city when the trains are cancelled or terminated at Coburg. So there's a need to recognise that, and also a need to recognise that tram services are not only overcrowded in Moreland on weekday peak hours, but also at night leaving the city. Like if we're really to shift modes of transport, we've got to have a more full-blooded public transport system which caters for all times of day and night if we're going to be serious. And so we've got to be lobbying strongly for that.
Sorry, I didn't expect that bell to be quite so loud. Is there a councillor that would like to speak against this motion? No? Anyone else who feels they really want to speak in support of it? Councillor... Councillor Doyle?
Yeah, I'd just like to speak to a few points. Thank you, Councillor Fanley, for adding the additional point around just in support of the advocacy plan. While there's some great actions which are strengthened through Councillor Bolton's additional amendments, I think I just wanted to really reiterate the importance of bringing our community in and really leveraging off, getting clear on what our ask is and really mobilising our community, because we know we can achieve much more when we are singing from the one songbook and we have really meaningful public consultation and engagement and partnership as well. I think it just highlighting, I'm not sure if it was mentioned, that this is actually focusing on council managed roads with advocacy around while we don't want to focus on, we want to give our attention to what can be achieved on our local roads, while also acknowledging that we are needing to be advocating to Vic Roads and other state authorities around increases in buses, trams and train networks, as well as cycling routes on main roads. I'd just like to say that MIT's confirmed that 2 out of 3 of our trips are actually within Moreland are less than 5 kilometres, which creates a really strong case that if we've got a supportive environment and people are feeling safe, so perceived and actual safety on our roads, that we can really support people to get around and not rely so much on cars. And this is one strategy that is helping us to get there. As a daily bike rider, it really saddens me actually to read that 6 out of every 10 people, interested but concerned cyclists. So 6 out of 10 people consider cycling as an option in some instances, but are often afraid to do so. And when there's compounding issues of when they're actually close to vehicles, close to other pedestrians, and that emphasises the strong need to make this investment. Moreland is making a strong investment into cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. I'd love to see even more again, but I think that we are, compared to other councils, we are doing a good job. And I think that one thing I really do like with this strategy is really the work that around shimmies, so creating direct, safe routes within that are off the main roads that allow people to get around safely. So yeah, I'd just like to speak in support of the officer recommendations of these amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Councillor Riley?
Yeah, just briefly, thank you. I just want to thank the councillors for making these amendments and support them. My interpretation was that the report was looking at interested but concerned potential riders in that 60%. So I'm putting a slightly different slant on it through the report, which is actually trying to target people by providing better, lower stress routes, so less traffic on those routes and safer routes, because we need to find ways to get people onto their bikes and taking those journeys that you talked about, Councillor Dorney. The advocacy component's covers off on many things: trains, roads, trams, pedestrians and cyclists. But the whole thrust of the problem in our city and Melbourne more broadly is that we don't have a very well connected, we don't have enough frequency public transport system. We need to have a turn up and go system. And what's coming through from the Fawkner and Glenroy and other issues across the city is that we don't have enough east-west connections, and we need to get a much better connected system so that people don't have to rely on their cars to get to the trams and trains, and therefore they could actually jump into a public bus and get there without having to clog up the car parks. And instead, our federal government's funding car parks instead of better bus services. When the Metro 1 train line opens in 2025, we're meant to get a better increase on the upfield line, and Councillor Bolton's been addressing that issue around campaigning to get duplication above Gowrie. However, without the higher frequency services, without the more regular services and the turn up and go system and the connecting with our buses, we are just going to have a really inadequate public transport system. So I commend the work that we're doing, but we need to get much more support from our local community to lobby our state government and our local MPs to ensure that we actually get closer to what we think is the kind of mode shift we need to have, so people can get out of their vehicles and they can walk more to public transport or to enjoy our roadways and to ride more. So I really support this work that officers have done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. The federal government might be funding car parks, but here at Moreland, we've just created more bicycle parking at the Fawkner shops. And so given what Councillor Dorney said about the less than 5K journey, I'd like to commend Councillor Farnley for bringing forward the two small pieces of work looking at Fawkner bike paths, because we can't create more bike paths if we don't, we can't create more bike parking if we don't create more bike paths. So that's my highlight of this piece of work, which I hold in very high regard of all of the things that we have done during this, what will be a 4-year period of council, and they're not all good, but this is one of the good ones. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? And I declare that carried unanimously. The next report is DCF 38.
Ask if the other urgent business item could be brought forward.
Yep, sure. I'll just put this and then we can, I'll bring that forward. DCF 3819, the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, Parking Implementation Approach and Principles.
I'd like to
Councillor
move the
Kavanagh.
officer recommendation.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Martin. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Kavanagh?
No, I won't actually.
Councillor Martin?
I'm okay.
Anyone like to speak against?
An amendment. Amendment which was circulated earlier by the director, just a slight amendment to, no, I don't have the.
I can read it for you.
Yeah, could you read it out?
Sorry.
To note.
Oh, beg your pardon.
Sorry, that was your point 4, wasn't it?
Yes, the 5.4, which is, reads that we note that the work that is currently being undertaken by council officers is exploring the issue surrounding healthcare workers' parking needs. Is that
That's
behind it?
acceptable to me as the mover?
Yep, acceptable to me as well.
Yep. Okay. So, did you want to speak?
Actually, I wouldn't mind speaking to that, although the mover hasn't actually spoken to the motion yet.
No, that's right.
I'll just explain why I've inserted that point. When council passed the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, and I was trying to envisage people who might be affected by it, and I thought about the question of zero parking developments where there's no parking for tradespeople who might need to service or renovate buildings, and no parking for residents to move, or removalists to move furniture into apartments. Presumably they fly. But one of the categories of workers that I didn't think about at the time was healthcare workers, because especially healthcare workers doing home visits, there might be other healthcare workers who might be disadvantaged. So I think council's tried to address the issue of tradespeople with special parking permits. I'm not sure if that will work personally, but that might help. That would help. But the issue of healthcare workers is a really pressing issue, because there's a lot of healthcare that happens in the home, and workers do need somewhere to park to be able to assist people in the home who have got health issues.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Could I ask the motion be put?
Thank you. Yes. Put that to the vote. All those in favour?
It's
Parking.
parking.
Just clarification, I thought we were talking about the amendment.
No,
it's been
the
accepted.
amendment was acceptable to.
Well, I have amendments in the report as well, so.
The amendment's been put.
Well, it's just been put.
My amendment?
No, the motion,
one at number
which has been incorporated. Councillor Bolton's amendment was acceptable to the mover of second and seconder, and it's just been put. And so, could we vote on that again, please? All those in favour?
Sorry, I have an amendment which I'd like to put to this report.
Okay, just before you made that comment, what happened was Councillor Martin asked that the motion be put, so we're now voting on whether the motion be put.
I think that's bad governance practice, but I guess it's up to the council.
I'd like to just get a vote from councillors that was proposed by Councillor Martin that this motion be put. All those in favour of the motion being put? Against? Declare that carried. So I'd now like to ask for a vote.
So now you have to put the motion.
Yeah. So I'd now like to ask for a vote on DCF 3819, Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy Parking Implementation Approach, which was the officer recommendation with Councillor Bolton's amendment. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
My voice is not going to be heard. There's no point.
We went in the room,
Stay in the
so
room.
we can't hear you if you're out of the room.
Yep, sorry.
Okay, Councillor Bolton has asked that we bring forward a second potential urgent business item.
Can I say what it is?
Sorry?
Can I say what it is and explain?
We just have to work out if we're accepting it into the agenda. So just give me a sec and I'll find it. So what we need to vote in is whether we will admit the urgent business item submission, which is the submission to the LXRP on level crossing removals on the Upfield line. So I'd like to vote on whether this item be admitted as urgent business. All those in favour? Oh, sorry.
I would like to move.
And I'm happy to
Councillor
second.
Bolton?
I'm happy to second. That'll be.
And Councillor Kavanagh is seconding.
Do you want me to explain my reasons why?
I think we all know, but you can if you need to.
No worries.
It's up to you.
Yeah, you can.
It's okay if people feel like okay.
Okay, so I'll just ask for a vote on whether this be admitted as urgent business item, the submission to the LXRP on level crossing removals on the Upfield line. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Councillor Bolton, would you like to please start by stating the motion?
So the motion is that Moreland Council notes and welcomes the community meeting initiated by the Moreland Level Crossings Removal Community Action Group, and have I got the name right? Involving 70 residents from a diverse range of perspectives that was held at on Saturday, 25 May at the Coburg Library. The Moreland Council notes and welcomes the document Vision for Upfield Corridor, agreed to by the group, which includes outstanding questions that require answers from the LXRP, proposals for future LXRP community consultations that provide more specific information and recommendations on issues relating to heritage, public transport, open space, safety and residential amenity and cycling and pedestrian access. Moreland Council gives its in-principle endorsement of the document and will present it to the LXRP for consideration prior to the close of submissions to the LXRP on the 25th of May.
And
14th of June, potentially.
14th of June.
Friday.
Oh, so they've extended the
To
date
Saturday.
now, as of today. Yeah, okay,
Not
so
late.
the date...
Hang on, I'll
needs-
just get you a seconder.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Councillor Riley?
Yeah, so the change would be to the 15th of June. And I think my purpose for moving this motion tonight has been reinforced by the fact that the state government released concept plans 2 weeks after the supposed community consultation. And I feel that while council has done a lot of work to liaise with the LXRP, put forward some of the views of the community, etc., I think it is particularly important that a group representing a range of different viewpoints within the Moreland community has got together and been able to work out a level of agreement on a range of amenity issues that need to be taken up with the LXRP. I think it is important that council indicates support. I know it would only be in principle support. One of the new things which council hasn't considered to date, which the group came up with, which I certainly think council needs to investigate, is the idea that the stations, Moreland Station, the elevated Moreland Station and the elevated Coburg Station, straddle Bell Street and Moreland Road, so that there is safe pedestrian access on both sides of the road, to avoid issues of pedestrians racing across dangerous roads, because there will be more fast-moving traffic along those roads without boom gates. So that's a new proposal, which obviously council has to investigate, but it is only in principle support to indicate that. But I think it is important that council indicates some in-principle support for the various proposals which have been put forward by residents around heritage, open space, cycling issues, because this is a major project which will be in Moreland forever, or for, you know, decades to come. And I think we need to fight for what we can get, you know, to have as good a development of this you know, elevated rail as we can get, and with people protected, with adequate, you know, cycling. I mean, I think there's a proposal for a veloway, which I think, you know, obviously there's sort of privacy issues to consider, but given that there aren't going to be boom gates for cyclists to catch the Coburg wave, we need to have a safe way for to separate out commuter cyclists from you know, other cyclists that might be stopping and starting, and pedestrians and so forth. So there's a range of issues that are canvassed in this document, but they're not, most of them are not new issues for the council. The only really new issue that I can see that's been canvassed is this access to the stations, straddling the major roads, which also would potentially move the stations away from the heritage stations and provide better sight lines to the heritage stations. I really think council needs to give some sort of public endorsement, even if it's only in principle, to this good work that's come forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Riley?
Just very briefly, thank you, Councillor Bolton. This, and thanks to the community group and all the community that have come together to work on this. It's an excellent example of how community can work, and I'm glad that we are actually able to consider this tonight to sort of give some sort of in-principle support. It was going to be difficult if we'd gone about it a different way, I think, for me, so I'm really pleased we are able to do this tonight. I think we're in a very strong position for the community to continue to advocate from here. As we know from the questions and answers tonight, there are many unanswered questions, and the announcement today actually does give cause for concern about where we go to from here. I, along with many of my community, have worked on the urban forest for this line, and I'm concerned about the fact that it and many older trees are under threat, and we need to make sure that we are doing our best to protect the heritage and the benefit of those trees and other aspects of the line. So look, thank you. I think Councillor Bolton's spoken very well. I don't need to go much further. I just want to commend this model. Many of the government agencies cause us more headaches than we need to, and most of tonight's meetings have been caused by other government agencies. I often get up here and bemoan that fact, and I wish that we had a revolution in government agencies to actually consult and do proper engagement with our communities, because the communities keep coming to us, expecting us to pick up the pieces, and in fact, it's the government, the state government ministers that need to take the blame for some of what's going on here. And this is a great example of how the community can come together to put the pressure on the government and the minister. And I think at this stage, our council's aligning very closely with these moves. It doesn't lock us into lockstep. It gives us some room to manoeuvre and to go from here and to continue to provide feedback. So I really thank you, and I hope you continue to run the campaign strong, because we need to get the best outcomes for our community. This is 1 in 100 years change that we're going to have that's going to be around for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? Are there any other councillors that would like to speak in favour of the motion?
Can I just ask a question?
Of course.
I know that that is going to go to to make a submission. Are we sending copies of the submission to anyone? I wouldn't mind sending a copy to local members, etc., and the minister, and also the shadow minister, because I think they might better lobby for some of those things on behalf of residents.
I think we can, I'll accept that as an amendment, that we send to copies of this to the local federal member, the local state members,
and I think the Minister for Transport and the Shadow Minister for Transport, I think.
Major projects.
And major projects. Sorry, it is major projects now, isn't it? That's
there's about 3 ministers.
okay. Good. Just so to get it out as much as possible. That's all.
It's acceptable to me. Yes. Thank you.
Okay,
It's acceptable. Thank you.
No.
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 Lost your chance.
I know that you would though. Okay, are there any other councillors that would like to speak to the motion? I won't, but only because I'm very worried about the time and I support it wholeheartedly. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, now I've got to work out where I'm up to. The next item on the agenda is DCD 1119, Aged Care and Disability Reforms Council Action Plan. And can I have Councillor Riley? Councillor.
Oh no, go on.
So Councillor Riley and Councillor Davidson second. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak? Councillor Davidson?
Yeah, just to say very briefly, this went out to a forum that was held on the 20th of May, and it was the older persons reference group was a key figure in that forum. The consultation was quite significant, and we have now developed a policy that is going to really help people in Moreland age and live well, including physical activities, environment, and streetscapes. So I'm really pleased to bring this.
Sorry, I think that's a different report. This is the Aged Care and Disability Reforms.
Right.
It's just because we've been jumping around a little bit. So we did DCF 3819.
And I'm doing DCD 1319.
Okay, so that's totally fine. What we'll do is...
Actually, why don't I move it, if you like?
Okay.
I can move it.
Sure.
Well, Councillor Riley already moved it. So
I'm more than happy for you to second if you want to speak to it.
okay, so what we'll do is we'll get Councillor Riley to move it and Councillor Bolton to second, and we'll catch you up in a sec.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Riley
I'll
has
reserve the right.
reserved the right, and Councillor Bolton, would you like to
I
speak?
will speak to it. I think this is about council's approach to a major change to aged care in the home, which is being rammed through by the federal government. So I am pleased. The reason I'm prepared to support this motion is because it commits the council to continue providing our home and community care service for people over 65 while block funding continues. So I think that's a very good thing. Where I would go further than the council's position is I think council needs to fight to retain a publicly provided system for home care. There's been a scandal about home care packages and in other parts of the country where there are not home and community care programs. So, so that's probably a difference I've got with the council, but I'm happy to support this motion because it commits us to not ram through outsourcing, as a couple of councils in Melbourne have already done, when the block funding has been extended by the federal government. And that block funding was extended because the system is in absolute crisis, which is very similar to what the NDIS is in at the moment, because it's an entirely privatised system, like the privatised dodgy, training providers and so forth. So, but I'm happy to support this because of the block funding approach.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried.
The procedural motion.
Yes.
Can we move on block those 4 items? I think there were 4 or 5 items that we listed earlier.
We did.
Did we ever done those already? Did we pass it?
Yeah.
Sorry, I've forgotten.
The
Oh, we did
beginning of the
too.
meeting.
I beg your pardon. Yes, there was an
It's
interruption.
the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you.
I'm glad I've been reminded. Thank you.
Totally fine. Okay.
What's going on that side?
That side. DCD 1219, Draft Sport and Active Recreation Strategic Framework, Council Action Plan Item D19, 194312. I have a mover for this report. Councillor Yildiz. And Councillor Bolton to second. Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bolton?
I think this is going out for consultation, this report. And one thing which I think is very positive about this is the report actually recognises the need to consult with both sporting clubs but also informal recreational users of reserves, like the resident who came to the meeting and asked the question earlier. So I think so that, you know, those informal people who, engage in informal recreation are sort of accounted for, and hopefully our consultation process will be able to make contact with some of those people.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. DCF 4019, Councillor O'Farnley is on his feet. Better outcomes for 2 dwellings on a lot. A review of dual occupancy development in Moreland. Council Action Plan D19 1611053.
Chair, I'm more than happy to move the council officer's recommendation outlined in the report, and if I have a seconder, I'm happy to speak to it.
Councillor Kavanagh? Yes. We just need to remind councillors that there's a slight amendment, there's an updated officer recommendation. The changes are not substantial. Point 3, upon receipt of the Minister's authorisation, A, Council is provided with a briefing that details any conditions of the Minister's authorisation, and B, you can probably read it for yourself. And there's a couple of
That's
words
fine.
a little bit further
Procedural.
down, authorisation.
Is that it? Just point 3? Well, that's more than acceptable. I'm happy to move that recommendation that's on the screen at the moment.
Thank you.
Happy to second it.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor O'Farnley, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to start actually by thanking council officers for their work on this. This is an issue that I've been quite passionate and vocal about, and I understand it's not an easy issue to move on and find solutions for. So I'd like to very much thank Director Priest for his work on this and his team for finding this as an option. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. The purpose of this report is to address that classic issue that we have from residents, which is there is far too much poor development occurring in our medium density areas. And we need to find alternative approaches to address those concerns. The purpose of this report is to engage the State Department responsible for planning in piloting a program that takes a look at streamlining processes for dual occupancy development, where those development applications are completely compliant with the Moreland Planning Scheme. In fact, it goes above and beyond on accessible standards. And what we're hoping to get as an outcome of all this is better quality development in medium density areas. This is a key issue that residents have raised continuously, and so I'm pleased to be able to put in front of residents clear action that we're taking to try and address this key concern. If there are any questions from council, I'm happy to answer them. Other than that, I think the report speaks for itself.
Thank you, Councillor O'Farnley. Councillor Kavanagh?
No, I think Councillor Farnham put it very
Are there any councillors that would like to speak against? Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to speak against this. I certainly recognise the work of council officers in the planning area, which is very difficult to deal with, to try and get better outcomes in terms of, dual occupancy. But I'm concerned about anything that removes third-party appeal rights, because while the developments that are proposed in this report for the Vic Smart 10-day permit process are meant to absolutely comply with the standards of the Moreland planning scheme. And yes, I also recognise that there's a lower level of objections, much fewer objections to these planning permits than maybe much more substantial developments. I'm just reluctant to agree to anything that removes people's right to be notified and object, because there may be some things that we miss in the planning scheme. It's not guaranteed that we'll absolutely pick everything up. That might be an issue for a neighbour, and maybe a serious issue. And I'm reluctant. I'm voting against this because I don't agree with any removal of people's right to be notified and people's right to object if they feel that's necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any councillors that would like to speak in favour of the motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, Councillor Riley. DCD 1319, Living and Ageing Well in Moreland Framework and Action Plan for Endorsement. So I have Councillor Riley on his feet and
Please,
Councillor
sorry.
Davidson to second. Okay. Councillor Riley? would you
Can
like
I move the officer's motion with a proposed additional recommendation, which is to include a point 2, to include the climate emergency statement as adopted by Council in the Living and Ageing Well in Moreland framework to guide further action. So I think that's there.
Yep. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes. Look, I just want to thank everyone who's been involved in this process. It's been quite comprehensive, and it's really brought together other strategies, and it's been great to have older people in our city working on this for some time. And I want to just acknowledge Councillor and Olivia Carly-Hannon, who's also been helping to do this work, and she's on leave at the moment. Just one small thing I think which is actually quite powerful is that through the consultation under point S7 on page 199 of the agenda, people wanted to ensure that all council information and publications are provided in accessible formats that can easily be understood by older residents, as well as translated in text or potentially in video format in the major language groups of older people living in Moreland, which I think an excellent outcome, and one that not just older people will benefit from, but all of our community through that as well, from all sorts of backgrounds. So I just want to commend the work that's going to do this and thank the officers and everyone involved, especially the community.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Davidson?
I think there's so many positive things that we can do in this space, and some of the highlights that have come out of this report and the framework for me include retaining independence within the home and helping people stay within their home for a longer period of time, helping people keep their mobility by becoming more active within Moreland, and it can be through small things like encouraging connection to community by having walking groups or aqua classes that are potentially low cost but really help people still feel connected even when their children move out of their home and they need to regain a sense of community. So it also includes things like physical environment, our park space, our streets, how we can help increase mobility for people that might need greater access. So I'm really pleased this report has come together and it's being put to Council tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against the motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. That we've already done the next item on the agenda as one of the en bloc items, so I'll move to DCD 1419, Full Potential, a strategy for Moreland's young people, draft for consultation. Councillor Dorney.
I'd like to propose to move the officer recommendations with the 2 additional points, which I'll just wait for.
And a seconder with Councillor Martin.
Cool. Yep. Okay. Yep.
There's still an invisible ink point 4, but that's okay. You can speak to it if you like, and we'll see it in a minute.
So I would like to support or endorse the strategy for Moreland's young people to go out to draft consultation that addresses a range of issues for young people as well as opportunities for the 30,000 young people that live in Moreland. I'd like to thank the huge amount of consultation work that has already occurred up to this point. Thank officers for their work, councillors for their contribution, the young people, including the Oxygen Youth Committee, school communities and other community and health services. It's a great strategy, and I look forward to hearing how we can improve on it even more, potentially with the draft consultation, with the consultation process. But at the moment, there's actions around improving Moreland Council's role in how we bring the youth services sector together, how we enhance voice and participation for young people, increase employment pathways, job readiness, skills creation, create spaces and places that meet the needs of young people, and as well as all of that which is helping to support health, wellbeing and resilience. I think this aligns really well to across a lot of council policies and within our vision, as stated in the council report. I think that we're able to strengthen this through the motion that I'm putting forward from Councillor Martin around climate emergency, including our statement around climate emergency and how that how that influences the strategy moving forward as we go out to the draft. As that's one of the things that we, when declaring a climate emergency, said that we would do it, embed it in future strategies, so aligning it to that motion. The other amendment that I am making is around collective impact. Collective impact's a collective framework that there's really great evidence that it's quite a low-cost way of addressing and having really positive outcomes for complex social problems. I think there's real opportunity to look at it, although it has been referenced in the strategy specifically around employment for young people. I think that could be refined even more to look at maybe a pilot in a certain area of Moreland potentially, but I'd just like to add that in to go out to draft to see what people have to say about that. So that's why I have included that additional amendment. I think that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Councillor Martin.
I'll be really brief in saying that I really appreciate and want to acknowledge the work of the staff in putting together this strategy, and also really thanking the committee and the tens, hundreds of hours that they collectively put into contributing to this strategy. I think it really is a fantastic start. I really look forward to having a lot of young people actually contribute to this draft and make submissions. And one thing in particular I'm really looking forward to, and that is working with the Oxygen Committee, especially around the enhancing voice and participation. I think it's something that we can definitely improve on as a council, and I'm really looking forward to the committee's involvement, particularly in council advice and decision making going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, very briefly, just really wanted to pick up on the fact that the service and support system is quite confusing and complex for young people, and I'm really glad that it's been identified in the consultation paper. So I'm looking forward to council being able to help reduce that confusion and make it more accessible for people, young people, as they are emerging into adult lives and becoming more independent. So this is a really important aspect of the report, and I'm just looking forward to what young people have to say about that, but particularly younger people who are outside the school system as well. So sort of young adult as well as people that are in the school system, because I think they're a really important older part of the younger cohort. So looking forward to what we can do to support them in other ways outside of those institutions.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DCF 4219, Essendon Fields Airport 2019 Preliminary Draft Master Plan Submission. No.
Yeah, I can move it.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah, I'm happy to move.
Okay, thank you,
With
Councillor
an
Davidson.
amendment.
Sorry, is Councillor Bolton seconding?
I think Councillor Davidson's going to move. Yeah.
And a
I'll move
seconder?
in.
I'll second. yeah.
Right, that's what I thought was happening.
Not an alternative, an additional point.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right, sorry.
Okay, so Councillor Davidson moving the officer's recommendation with an additional point, which is being seconded by Councillor Bolton.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And the additional point is to read, council is to encourage residents to make submissions to the Essendon Fields Airport Preliminary Draft Master Plan 2019 by the 2nd of July.
Would it be possible to get that again?
Can you just read that again, please,
Sure.
Councillor Davidson?
Council encourages residents to make submissions to the Essendon Fields Airport Preliminary Draft Master Plan 2019 by the 2nd of July.
Thank you.
And the part with attachment 1 about the invoice abatement, that's included now too, isn't it? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And just after the word council, we need to lose the word is in the second. Yeah. Okay.
And the additional amendment comes from one of the members in the gallery tonight, Mr. Bonifazio, who pointed to his concern about the noise levels and the effect that it's having on his health, and probably the most appropriate path for him to go down is through contacting the Essendon Fields Airport and to make a submission to their master plan as well. And our role in assisting residents is by actively encouraging them through contacting them and supporting them through that process. Yeah, it was a bit concerning to hear, and I'm not sure about the timeframes that he was speaking about, but that the aeroplanes were continuing to go past even after the curfew cut off. And I think that's something that we potentially, as a council, could take on notice and look into based on his initial question in question time.
Yep.
That's fine. I think that's good to include this. I suspect we're going to need to do some more work on this issue. I'm not quite sure of the range of residents who are affected by this, but it is an important issue. I'm very aware of this being an issue for residents in Gladstone Park kind of area, and with the Melbourne airport, and also in Sydney when there was a big stash in the 80s. So I think it's something we need to take really, really seriously. And we also, I'm not sure if council's been contacted by many residents other than Antonio, but I think somehow we've got to go to some effort to try and publicise this, perhaps in the council's page in the Moreland Leader, as well as our website, and I'm not quite sure of the range, the actual particular area that is affected by this, but it would be good to try for us to identify that at some point in time so that we can better understand who's affected and what we need to argue that the Essendon Airport needs to do to amend this situation. I mean, in Sydney, they were forced to double glaze people's windows and so forth. So that's certainly one option. But obviously, the airport curfew is also an issue as well. And there has been a campaign group more outside of Moreland opposed to the extension of the Essendon airfield on safety grounds. plane crashes and that kind of thing. But I think at least this starts us thinking about this issue while we start to understand the extent of the problem.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any Yes, Councillor Kavanagh.
Just briefly. Just to say, I know this has been an issue for Gowanbray residents as well. When I was at a meeting a few years ago up at Gowanbray, they were saying that to break the curfew at that stage, all the company had to do was to leave a message on the phone messaging of CASA to say that mail deliveries weren't able to be done on time, so we're breaking the curfew tonight, etc. And also that the curfew doesn't apply to emergency helicopters, etc. during the night. And so, look, it is an issue, and certainly not just in Oak Park where Tony is, but certainly in Gowanbray it's an issue as well.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Tony came because I highlighted him to the fact that this was in the agenda, because last time we made a submission to the Melbourne Airport, he was aware of that and alerted us to something that resulted in the submission that we've got in this report being much more conscious, really probably is the word, and I think also talk to us about the emissions involved as well. So I think that potentially there is an opportunity for maybe the Comms Department or someone here at Moreland City Council to get in touch with the Broadmeadows Progress Association or whichever group, even a group of residents, to look at trying to record how often those breaches are happening. But I think that it's important to recognise that we are learning more about this stuff because of the feedback that we're getting from the community, and that this current submission has reflected that even more deeply than the last one did. So I was kind of surprised to see this coming, but I'm glad that the letter that I'm going to have to put my name to reads the way that it does. So I'd like to commend the work. Councillor Davidson?
Just as a potential other amendment, if it's acceptable, to also include obtaining information from the Essendon Airport in relation to their adherence to the curfew, so that there is some kind of overall comprehensive document that we can look at and then potentially advocate on behalf of residents to have some soundproofing measures later on.
Okay, so because it was your motion and
I'm happy to
Councillor...
move that if that's all right.
Yeah, well, can I just propose some slightly different words, which would say something like ask the Essendon Fields Airport for a report of the regularity of breaches or something for the last 12-month period.
Okay. That's it.
Is that...
Yeah, I'm happy to, if you want to move that for the chair, I'll second. I think you're the seconder though, aren't you? So I'll second that. Yeah, I know it's acceptable to you too.
We just accepted it with the motion, we don't need to go through an amendment.
Yeah. And do you think those, can I just ask you, Phil, whether you think those words achieve the kind of goal that we're after in terms of asking for a report? Does the regularity make any sense, or do you say, like, is there a different word that should be there?
A report of the breaches of the curfew. You just don't even need the regularity.
Yeah.
A report on breaches of the curfew.
Yeah. Councillor Dolby has a suggestion.
Or a proposal, one or the other.
Well, okay, thank you. What we'll do is we'll ask the Essendon Airfields and they can tell us whether it's the police helicopter or some other thing. So I think I'll put that to the vote unless anyone else really wants to speak to it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay. DCI 919, Public Place Recycling Trial and Soft Plastics Trial Conclusion. Councillor Martin and Councillor Dorney.
Yes, so I'd like to thank officers for coming back this month after this report was deferred. The additional data has definitely improved the recommendation coming from him. I'd also like to thank Councillor Tapanos for kicking this off what is probably a couple of years ago now. What we've seen in this report and the data that's come back is that the recycling bins on Sydney Road, if they have a round opening, there's less contamination. If they're next to a general waste bin, there's less contamination. If they're standing alone, there's higher contamination rates. And so what we've learnt from this trial is that we can position recycling bins next to existing general waste bins with a round opening, and we will get lower levels of contamination than other recycling bins along the municipality. And I think that's some key learnings from this. Obviously, we would love to see no contamination in our recycling bins to make sure that all of the recycled material does get recycled. But it is a great step forward in reducing those rates.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Donny?
Yeah, I just echo Councillor Martin's comments, but I just would like to add there's also a report which has come back to us. It was deferred last month around the soft plastic trial. We trialled having drop-off bins in 3 locations in key activity areas in Brunswick, Coburg and Glenroy, and the report is that they were not successful. There was high contamination and very low uptake. So I'm kind of a little bit torn as to where to from here, and I was interested in, maybe looking at an additional point around a report of, okay, what can we do here? I think as both a council and as a state and as a nation, we're in a waste crisis. Soft plastics is one of those products that we are dealing with. We're dealing with in our rivers, in our creeks and in our oceans, harming, every aspect of human and environmental life, as well as it's also potentially, while respecting that we need to be ultimately refusing this product and working out how we can really reduce our consumption. There is potential there for a product that can be recycled, and there is a market for local government, state government being able to use that product in our infrastructure, in our seating, in our bollards, parks, schools, leisure centres. So we're going to receive, just noting to the community that we are looking into this issue and what the best evidence is for how we can both deal with this product as a recyclable material, but also with the work we're doing in the waste and litter strategy for really reducing and refusing moving to zero waste to landfill by 2030. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Are there any councillors who would like to speak against this report? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. DCF 4319, achieving zero carbon in the planning scheme. Councillor Martin?
We haven't opened with
No, not this one. It was taken out.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and it was taken out because I have a slight amendment to add an additional dot point.
Totally okay.
And I'm happy to explain the additional point, and that is just following the adoption of the budget process, that council initiate the next steps by writing to all 30 CASB councils, seeking to inform them of the next steps.
And I'll have a seconder. Councillor Riley?
I think this piece of work in particular is definitely something that Moreland is really leading the charge on. This is about improving the environmentally sustainable design elements within our planning scheme. It came from my notice of motion asking for looking into pushing that all roofs either have solar panels put on them or they're green roofs. It also looked at the elements of the scheme, particularly around waste, where there's a lot of issues where bins aren't really included in the planning scheme, and also looking at apartment buildings, making sure that there's multiple chutes within those buildings. It's been really positive. I have a lot of councillors that get in touch and want to know where this is at. And so it's really great knowing that other councils are looking to Moreland for this leadership, and it's fantastic that the work that we've done so far really shows that this work can be done. And really working with some of the brilliant stuff that the City of Melbourne are going to be putting forward shortly, and really trying to push what is, things that are being rolled out internationally in Europe, California, places where they have been doing energy efficiency. They've been doing this stuff for many years, and it's about time that us in Victoria really caught up with the rest of the world.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Riley? Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. I'll now move to DCF 4419, Amendment C185, Glenroy Library Rezoning, Decision Gateway 3, consider adoption of amendment. Councillor Davidson? And the seconder? Councillor Martin?
So this report is to seek that we rezone the Pascoe Road Library site and rezone it to Commercial 1, which will enable the hopeful future sale of the land, which will then enable the library to move to the Weechef Hub site, which is going to be a much bigger and better facility for the Glenroy community. And it also includes notification to surrounding residents in relation to the sale and the potential rezoning of the land.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
No.
Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. The next report is DCF 4519, Amendment C169, Advertising and Club Signage in Open Spaces, Decision Gateway 3, consideration of the panel report and adoption of the amendment. Could I have a mover for this report? No?
Yeah,
Thank you, Councillor Farnley. And a seconder? Councillor Martin? Councillor Farnley, would you like to speak?
No.
Councillor Martin? I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DCF 4619, laneway closure, Bonwick Street, streetscape upgrade. Councillor Farnley? Councillor Bolton? Councillor Farnley, would you like to speak?
Well, very briefly, Mayor, we had a fantastic event organised by the council officers at Bonwick Street to mark the construction commencement last week, and it was a great turnout actually. I think it looks to me about 60 people or so, roughly. Looking at the director, but he's too busy on the laptop. So 60 or so people. Director spoke very well, me not so well, but we both got on the golden shovel, and I believe commencement of work starts today.
Yep.
Was today, John? You were there? Councillor Englert has confirmed that it did start today. Thank you.
Any golden shovels there today, John? No.
No golden shovels.
Councillor Bolton?
No, I don't need to add anything extra.
I'd just like to add that I was in Canberra with an atrocious case of FOMO and watched the video afterwards, and I'd like to thank Councillor Farnley for carrying the mantle on the day, even though he's incredibly unwell by the look of it, but also give a plug to the John Faulkner Secondary College, who did an incredible job with the drums. So look forward to seeing more of that happen throughout the city in the future, because they have won some grant money and will be doing more drum lessons. So is there anyone that would like to speak against the closure of the Bonwick Streets, that motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, I declare that carried. So we've already done DEP 519, redevelopments of section, and now I'll move on to DBT 1119, Councillor Code of Conduct Review. Councillor Riley is on his feet.
Thank you. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an additional point 4.
Councillor Kavanagh is going to second for you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Just to note, there needs to be a correction in the actual document because it's section 2.11.2, regarding the Assembly of Councillors. In the last paragraph, just above the final 2 dot points, there's the word "not" in there, and in fact, it negates the whole point of the document. So it should read that a councillor must disclose a conflict of interest either, and then going on to explaining the other 2 dot points. That's when, as soon as it basically says when they are aware of it, or at the time, as soon as they can. So I think it's really important that we actually do this, and otherwise it's good to have our code of conduct updated.
Thank you, Councillor Riley.
Thank you to the
Councillor
officers for their work.
Just very briefly to say, you have to get up pretty early in the morning to beat Councillor Riley on these things. So well done on that great pickup. And I didn't get a chance before when John asked a question of governance, but just to say that, John, first time I've ever on council, I've ever had a question from the public gallery on the governance report. So congratulations.
I'd just like to highlight the value of having teachers on the council and put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, the next report we have to consider is EMF 1919, Procurement Policy Annual Review, and Councillor Martin.
So I'd like to move the officer recommendation with one slight amendment, and that is to just some of the wording on the note. I believe it sort of alludes to saying where applicable, depending on the nature of the procurement. I believe that's a little bit too ambiguous.
I'll just get you a seconder. Councillor Bolton, thank you.
Yeah, so it's thank you, Councillor Bolton. So what that's doing is it's essentially removing some of the ambiguity there in that wording, just highlighting that we want to see environmental and social weightings in every procurement going forward. I think one thing in particular about this report, I would really like to thank our procurement team. It is something that, as a council, we've highlighted the importance of updating our procurement policy. For those that don't know, council plays quite a huge role in purchasing everything from your roads to employing contractors, you name it, and we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on this stuff. What this policy is actually allowing us to do is by saying that we value local jobs, we value environmental products, environmental management, recycled content, you name it, where we've now got a really robust policy, and I think the team is definitely coming along really well, and we're seeing it through our tenders. We're seeing some really amazing things, being purchased from recycled roads to contracts where we're employing people who are vulnerable. So it is something that we really should acknowledge. It's not something that's as sexy as some of our other policies, but it is something that's vitally important for this council.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Bolton? Is there anyone that would like to speak against this report? All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. I'll now move on to DCF 4719, Page Street, Coburg Road closure. Proposal to place and maintain barriers to permanently block motor vehicles. Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Bolton. Thank you.
Gee, the end of the process is a bit quieter than the beginning of the process, but it's fair enough. But in all honesty, I was all bargy back and forth, but I think this is a good outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Bolton.
I think this is a great outcome for the community. I think residents were really quite shocked when council did all this wonderful work in this particular lane, sort of really more of a laneway rather than a street, and it looked like a pedestrian environment, but we were planning at that time to open it up to cars, and it just seemed like a total contradiction and really concerning the residents, as well as you know, people who had to enter buildings along the street without sight lines to be able to see cars going along it. So I'm glad we've saw the light in time to be able to commence this road closure project, and I'm glad that there's a proposed, I'd certainly commend to councillors that we pass this and give residents confidence that they can walk in this area without being banged by a car.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Anyone against this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. EMF 2019, discontinuance of Bernard Street, Oak Park. Councillor Kavanagh.
Could I move the officer recommendation, please?
And Councillor Davidson is happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. In doing so, can I thank first name, Aiken, the resident who raised it with me. I've just forgotten his first name, Mr. Aiken. He raised this with me at the time, about 12 months ago. You wouldn't believe that this was a designated street as such. You know, it doesn't look like a street in any shape or form. Certainly amazed it actually has a street name as well. But it's just a piece of land in between two houses, in essence, and provides access to J.P. Faulkner Reserve. Vince Aiken. And I thank him for raising it with me. I see that the executive summary says maybe not suitable for a community garden, but I assure you I will be coming back at some point with some suggestions as to what to do. It certainly needs to maintain the pedestrian link, but it's the width of a house block, so there'd be something I'm sure we could do with that little area as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Davidson?
Sorry, I do wish to make an amendment if it's acceptable to the mover. However, I note that I did second.
Okay, well, if you like, I'm happy to second.
Thank you.
And you can put your amendment forward.
And the amendment is in line with what Councillor Kavanagh was saying. I note that the officer recommendation is that because there is no sort of other facilities like water and power and storage to the area, that it's not being identified as a priority for a community garden. However, on the following page, it says that open space officers will need to undertake further scoping for landscaping, vegetation and path plans. The additional point that I would seek to add would be along the lines of when the open space officers are undertaking the further scoping for landscaping, they also consult with the community for an appropriate form of a community garden, noting the lack of facilities.
That's acceptable to
Okay. Absolutely, yeah. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, I declare that carried. Now, EMF 2119 has also been already voted on as part of that block that we passed earlier, as well as DBT 1219, which was the governance report. So I'll now move to DCF 4819, which is the City Oval Stormwater Harvesting System Tender Award. Can I have a move of that motion? Councillor Riley and Councillor Dorney to second. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to it?
No, thanks. No.
Councillor Dorney?
Yeah, I just would like to acknowledge that this is a really significant piece of work on a significant oval for Moreland. I recommend people having a read of this report on page, what page does it start? Just in your spare time, from page 664 of the agenda. It just really highlights the work of council in creating a water-sensitive city. This particular piece of work in looking at stormwater harvesting for irrigating our city oval is looking, at the moment, the oval currently uses over approximately 15 million litres of drinking water for irrigation each year, costing over $40,000. So while it's a significant cost, over $1 million, the payback and the benefit to community and really future-proofing our city is, the benefits are huge. So I'd just like to highlight that point.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Point well made. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. EMF 2219, provision of valuation services tender. Can I have a mover for this report?
Can I ask a question of the director before the meeting? Just a question to the director. I note that the company that's been recommended is the company that's done the valuation for the last 2 years. I'm not sure about this year, but certainly the valuations of the year that I was mayor, so last year, I probably had more complaints about the valuations than any other time. Are we confident that that we'll have, if you like, less concerns than what we've had in the past?
Sorry. So these valuation services are not for the valuations of the properties,
Right.
so that's still being done by the state government. So the state government is on it now. So these are the valuation services for our asset purposes.
I apologise. Thank you. No worries. I'm happy to move it if that's the case.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Riley, as a seconder.
And just to say, I apologise to the manager, but I also apologise to the company if I've made a comment there that's incorrect. I apologise.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak? I just want to draw attention to a fact that was raised just then, which is very important actually, which is that council does not value properties. That is something that is done by the state government, and we do determine our rates by the value of the properties as they're told to us, but it isn't something that we do here, because I think potentially what happened with all those conversations you might have had, Councillor Kavanagh, you might have clarified that for the city, because I haven't had a lot of contact at all about that issue. So are there any councillors that would like to speak against this particular motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I'll now move to EMF 2319, State Purchasing Contract for the provision of natural gas large sites.
Sorry, Mayor, I'd just like to declare that I'm a conflict due, perceived conflict due to conflicting duties,
Thank you.
conflicting work duties.
1, 2, 3. So can I ask councillors if I could please have a mover for this report? And Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Yildiz to second. Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Councillor Yildiz? Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this report? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. So we can have Councillor Martin and Councillor O'Farley, if he's all right. There's a few hacking problems. DCI 1019, contract 789T, provision of asphalt quarry products and profiling tender award. Do I have a mover for this report? Councillor Riley, and a seconder? Sorry, I just saw Councillor Martin. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to it? Councillor Martin? I'd just like to draw attention to one thing, which is that Asphalt Tech is a company that has made a trial project road in the city using steel slag, which is a byproduct from a steel manufacturing plant in the roads. So I'm pretty excited about that. They're using it instead of virgin aggregate, which is made out of bluestone, I believe. And I had the pleasure of being able to visit that site, and the road looked amazing, and I hope that it's holding up and we can see more of those in the future. Or some of those other companies might build the same type of roads. So I put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I'll now move to DCD 1519, contract 776T, food supply and packaging services. And can I have a mover for this report? Councillor Yildiz? And the seconder? Councillor Riley? Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak to it?
We're a bakery, I do.
No conflicts?
I bought a pie from you once.
We'll call that you speaking to the report.
Yeah.
Councillor Riley would like to speak to the motion. Although, are there any councillors that would like to speak against this particular motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. If it makes you feel better, I used to live across the road from University Meet. Still not a conflict. DCI 1119, contract 788T, drainage CCTV surveys, drainage and GPT cleaning and associated works tender award. Councillor Riley, I saw your hand first, and Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak to it, Councillor Riley?
Yeah, just look, I just want to commend all the work that's gone into this, and officers that just because we're not speaking to them, we don't. I appreciate the work going into all of them, and it's really important that we do it. But thank them for this, for all these contracts that are going. I'm speaking on behalf of all the contracts that have gone before, but also this one, particularly because this is going to make sure that we keep our drains clean, reduce our floods, and try and improve the amenity of our city, particularly when we know we've got some fairly awful flooding areas that we need to be dealing with, which have been dealt with at other meetings in the past. So thanks for all the work in this. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Yildiz, is there anyone that would like to speak against this report? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. So we'll now move to the notices of motion, and the first notice of motion we have this evening is notice of motion 2219. Councillor Riley?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Bolton. Look, people will be familiar may well be familiar with the West Papuan community, many of whom are refugees and have chosen Melbourne to be a place to settle in. And they're a very small community, and they run a radio program on 3CR regularly, and it's a really important way for them to activate and network within their own community. And they need to reach their target. They're looking for support to do that. I just would like to delete the date or perhaps to insert that at a date to be determined, because things are still in a bit of flux there. May actually go into the next financial year, which I don't think it makes any difference to this, but I just think this is an important way of supporting a really small group who are working towards some pretty important human rights issues around self-determination in their former country of residence, and that they're continuing to work on that from here. And given our history with places like Timor-Leste and the kind of similar issues, they're not exactly the same, but not too dissimilar, I think it's really important that we continue to extend a helping hand, and I think this is a really practical way of doing that. They want to raise their own money, but this really gives them an ability to do that and to also engage a broader community as they do that. So I think it's a worthy cause. I hope people will support it.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bolton?
I won't speak to it unless someone speaks against.
Sounds fair. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. The next notice of motion is 2319. Councillor Bolton?
So the title of the motion in the agenda is Greek Storytime at Moreland Libraries. So I'd like to move a slightly amended motion from what appears in the agenda. So it reads that council notes a request for an increased frequency of Greek Storytime at Moreland's Libraries, and that council officers will prepare a report that investigates the possibility of increasing the frequency of storytime at Moreland's Libraries in a number of priority community languages.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton, and Councillor Kavanagh is going to second.
Yes, so my motivation for moving this motion, I mean, there's already story time at a number of libraries. I'm not aware of all of the story times in and all of the languages that they're in. I know that there's a regular Urdu story time at Faulkner Library, but I had a request from a Greek family in Moreland to increase the amount of Greek story time at the libraries. You know, currently it's monthly, and there's a desire for children to be able to connect with not only their parents but their grandparents and extended family by having access to story time in their parents and grandparents' language. But also it raises the issue of whether there are any other community languages that are missing out that need either an increased frequency of story time or to be introduced as a story time from to begin with. So that's why I'm moving this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kavanagh.
Yeah, in this form, I'm happy to support this motion because it talks about a number of community languages, and I'm sure the report will itemise the languages that are at need. And I know that in Glenroy, for example, the Nepalese story time is very popular, and I'm sure if there was one in Faulkner for Arabic languages, it would be extremely popular as well. So looking forward to hearing about that, and I'm glad it's a broader motion rather than a single motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against Councillor Bolton's notice of motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? And I declare that carried. The next notice of motion we have is 2419, which is financial support for undress runways. So this is that we contribute $3,000 to undress runways as financial support to go towards the delivery of a 3-day sustainable fashion conference to be held at Batman Royale, which is just up near Batman Station, and 2, promotes the event through Council's communication and economic development networks. And Councillor Dorney, thank you for the second. So this, I was approached by someone from the community who asked me to support this project, which will be delivered later on in the year, and it hasn't been released yet, so I don't want to say too much, but basically I think it talks very well to what we're trying to create in terms of our design precinct through Brunswick and the area from the textiles school down at RMIT and all the way up. But I think it also talks to the implications of declaring a climate emergency, because the undress runways are really focused on ethical and sustainable fashion, and just thinking outside the box and talking to quite a lot of stuff like, you know, wearing less makeup and wearing ethical makeup, and talking about body image and body dysmorphia and a whole lot of important stuff that I think is the kind of thing that we need to be supporting through various policies that we have here at Council. And I think that it would be a boon for the city that we can probably expect about 500 people to come to each day of this event, which will also enable local tradespeople to have stalls on the final day. But yeah, I don't think it's a huge amount of money, and I'm looking forward to councillors supporting me, supporting them, something like that. Thank you.
Is there a reason why this hasn't been put in as a grant application?
Yeah, it was to do with the timing. We discussed that, and they didn't have enough time to get the $3,000. It needs to be put forward as a bond to secure the venue. Councillor Dorney?
Yeah, I'm thrilled that Undress Runways want to host an event in Moreland. I think, yeah, it would be a real joy to bring an event like this that is really challenging the fashion industry, the fast fashion industry, which is absolutely horrendous, with 6 tonnes of clothing sent to landfill every 10 minutes. So young people that are wanting to actually, change the story around that is super exciting. It aligns really well with our economic development strategy around supporting local economy, growing socially inclusive and that is environmentally sustainable as well. As Councillor Merri-bek has indicated, it also aligns with our climate emergency strategy and is just helping to show there is another way. Yeah, so look forward to it.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I now need to exit the room. Oh, before, yeah, thanks. Before I go, I need to get an extension of time, and Councillor Riley has offered to put the motion, and there's Councillor Kavanagh. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. So I now need to declare a conflict on the next item, which is notice of motion 2519, consistent heritage signage in the Pentridge Prison Precinct, because I have an indirect perceived direct conflict. And I'll ask Councillor Riley to take the chair.
Yep, thank you. So do I have a mover for the note, for this notice of motion, NOM non 25/19? Thank you,
So
Councillor Bolton.
basically, for people who might be watching online and aren't sure what this motion is about, it's about consistent heritage signage in the Pentridge Prison Precinct. Do you want me to read it out and then see if there's a seconder?
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Tapanos.
So I'll explain what the
Please,
motion is about, because at the moment, the developers in the Pentridge Prison Precinct are starting to apply for all sorts of commercial signage, but there is no plan of consistent heritage signage across the whole Pentridge Precinct. So you wouldn't, and now that the developer of the southern side has sold off lots of chunks to lots of different developers, there's a real risk, if we don't move fast, of the whole thing breaking up as a sort of historical precinct with no consistent historical signage. And it was in constructing this motion, I found out that in 2002, the original landowners signed an agreement, a Section 173 agreement, which required a heritage interpretation management strategy and management plan to be prepared and implemented. The strategy was approved by Council in 2003, and they haven't done it. It's 2019. So this is what's happening in the heritage precinct of Pentridge, is the developers, especially in the southern area, have just been ignoring these agreements which have been signed many, many years ago. So this is basically now, because these have been historical agreements which have been agreed to. I understand council isn't in a position to enforce things, only in a position to write to the developers and ask for an update on the timing and implementation. I gather Shea has now developed a heritage interpretation strategy and management plan. So this motion is to write to them to ask for an update on the timing and implementation of it. But the developer in the southern site has never ever submitted a plan, despite this being a requirement dating from 2003. So it's reminding them of their outstanding obligation. And I'd like to add an extra point that a report come back to council on your response. Is that acceptable?
Would a briefing be acceptable?
No, I think it should be in the public gallery, because there's public consultation about the commercial signage at the moment. So I think it needs to come back to the gallery.
Is that acceptable to the seconder? Did we get the form? Can you just say the form
It's
of
just
words
simply
again,
that
please?
a point 3, that a report on the response from the developers come back to the council.
Thank you.
I think someone else will have to move that.
Oh. Thank you for the point of order.
I'm happy to move point 3 if the mover's not able to move point.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh's going to move.
Yeah,
And I can accept it into the motion.
Councillor Kavanagh's suggesting it so that the mover and the seconder can accept it.
She'd already moved the original one, so therefore.
Yes.
Okay.
Just to be clear, thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. And that's acceptable to the mover and seconder. So we now have a substantive motion with 3 points there. Does anyone wish to speak against, does the seconder wish to speak?
Briefly, yeah, look, slowly I believe we are losing the heritage fabric up at Pentridge, and it's probably not acceptable that the southern side of the site hasn't provided the heritage interpretive strategy and management plan. It's not difficult to put interpretive panels up. There are a number of sites in the southern area which are quite significant areas in our history, in our state's history, and it just seems like common sense to me. I do agree with the additional dot points because I do think such a document should be in the public domain where it can be viewed and assessed by residents. Certainly when you're talking about heritage preservation, we always think about the big things, the bluestone walls and the towers and the cells. But what is actually really important is the smaller things and the way they are interpreted for our community. So having panels that are informative and engaging with the community throughout the site is quite important in telling the story of Pentridge. So I'm shocked that they haven't done it already, and I hope that they do take note of this and we do get some information shortly and we can share that with everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any other speakers who wish to speak against the motion? And unless there's anyone who wishes to speak in favour of the motion, you'll need to speak on this. Otherwise, we'll put the vote. All those in favour? And all those against? That's carried, and I'll declare that carried. And can we please invite Councillor Wood back into the chamber? Thank you. And I'll vacate the chair when she does.
The next motion we have is notice of motion 2619, support for homeless and people with drug or mental health challenges. That's okay. And there's a slight amendment which you have. I can't see that invisible ink. I mean, I can now. So I've just added a point for at Councillor Dorney's suggestion, which states writes to mayors of other metro councils informing them of our letter and encourages them to do the same, and also encourages them to make submissions to the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system, and I've left out a comma. So the motion is that Moreland City Council writes to the Premier of Victoria and Minister of Housing to express Council's deep concern that there is insufficient investment and budget allocation for social housing and request a substantial investment at the next budget. 2, writes to the Premier of Victoria and Minister of Mental Health to urge the government to commit and ensure that an appropriate financial commitment is made in responding to the findings of the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system. And 3, makes a submission to the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system, which closes on the 5th of July 2019. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. So this motion, we've written many letters like this. It's not an original idea, but after the death of another woman, admittedly not in our city, but fairly close to our city, and the complexities that were involved with that situation, and the subsequent release of the state budget, I was fairly devastated, and also the fact that we have a Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system. I was fairly devastated to realise once again something that we all know and have known for a while, that if you're falling through the cracks, all you're going to do is keep on falling because there is simply nothing to catch you. And that's because, for some bizarre reason, those services have just been all but dissolved. And so this is just another, vain attempt probably at trying to signal to our community, but also the broader community, and maybe even to encourage other councillors and other councils to really try and put some pressure on the state government ultimately about this growing issue that we have of people who are suffering in our community, and suffering because, well, through no fault of their own. I mean, it's very apparent to all of us how easily any of us could become homeless, and then what that can, in some cases, lead to. It doesn't, you don't choose to be homeless, you don't become homeless because of something that happened in your childhood necessarily. You know, this is the kind of thing that can just happen to anybody. And I think that once you are vulnerable, things get worse and worse. And I think that's been proven time and time again because we don't have the support in place. So I hope councillors will support this, and I know they've supported similar motions in the past, but I also hope that other councils and other council laws will put similar motions forward in their councils. Councillor Kavanagh?
No, I do not. Thanks. That's expressed it very well.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to speak against this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. And the next notice of motion we have is notice of motion 2719, call for redirection of federal government funds from East-West Link to public transport infrastructure. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it. Councillor Riley, thank you. So probably more of the same. We just heard recently that there's a huge amount of money, $4 million, earmarked to develop the East-West Link, which is something that this council took a position against in its former incarnation, and it was a hugely mobilised campaign that involved a lot of the community. Some people would argue that it was an election issue. So what we're doing here is restating our position. Other areas of the state government and also other councils have had different ideas about where this money might be spent, everything from childcare to specific projects. But I think considering the position that we're in and what we're advocating for, the idea of proposing $4 million for public transport is a good one. And imagine that. Imagine that. So I'd like to thank Councillor Riley. Would you like to speak to it? Anyone like to speak against it? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. So that concludes our notices of motion. I'll move on to notices of rescission, and we have none. So I'll now move on to foreshadowed items. Councillors, do you have any items you would like? Shall I just finish reading? Sorry. Like to foreshadow that may be the subject of a notice of motion for the next council meeting. Councillor Riley?
Yes, just would like to foreshadow that I'm talking to other officers and hearing a submission from the Victorian Action Group on Transport recently that with the closure of the LXRP work that's imminent and the current closure at Jill Station, where we've just had one building built and then now another one that may take 12 to 18 months. With those closures on the shared upfield path, I'm foreshadowing that I'd really like us to look at some options for better rerouting of those closures. There's going to be really major impacts around Coburg, but I won't go into the arguments at the moment, except to say that I'll be looking at perhaps what options we might as a council take to reroute that, but also to work with Vic Roads and others in terms of looking at what options or opportunities might be available, particularly along Sydney Road with the work that was being done prior to the state election and I believe is about to begin again, although it's a bit of a black hole. And if that does happen, that we might try and explore that with Vic Roads and the working group that was working on that as well, as to what might be possible to explore there while those closures are happening, to see what benefits might derive on Sydney Road as a part of that. We've tried this in the past, but I think it's worth giving it another shot.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any councillors that would like to foreshadow any other items? Okay, so That concludes, well, we have no urgent business because we've already addressed the urgent business. So I'd now like to move into the confidential business section of the agenda. And could I please have a motion to close the council meeting to the public in accordance with section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989? Thank you, Councillor Davidson. And Councillor Riley as a seconder. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I now declare the council meeting closed to the public at approximately 10:20 p.m. I'd like to thank the gallery attendees and also thank those watching live streaming on the internet. Let me just read that again. I'd like to thank the gallery attendees and also thank those watching on live streaming for your interest in council matters and respectfully request that the public kindly leave the council chamber. And I wish you all a good night. And the meeting closed at 10:20.
By 2036, it's estimated there'll be 43,000 more people living here in Moreland. And they're all going to need to move about. To walk, cycle, drive, bus, tram, train, use shared vehicles, and whatever technology emerges next. Smart, effective transport is vital. So Moreland Council has plans to help keep us moving now and into the future. Our road network is already congested and more cars will only make that worse. We need to limit the number of additional cars travelling and parking around our city if we want to keep our quality of life or make it better. Building wider or more roads isn't the answer. There just isn't land available without immense cost. The answer is in making other forms of transport more attractive, practical, accessible and available. We're lucky. Parts of Moreland are rich with transport options. In these areas, there are more opportunities to change the way we move around. And we're working to create even more transport options for everyone throughout Moreland. We're going to give more space to pedestrians and cyclists and work with the state government to improve public transport. We want residents who move into new housing that's close to public transport and shopping areas to bring fewer cars with them. We're encouraging this by allowing fewer spaces within these new buildings and continuing to limit access to on-street parking permits for these new residences. This will only happen in activity centres and not in other parts of the city. Parking restrictions already exist in many parts of the city, and we're going to extend these to better manage parking in and around our business and shopping areas. We don't want the sought-after parking in these areas taken up all day by just one car. We want to ensure the spaces can be used by multiple people visiting our shops, doing business, using our facilities, and spending time in cafes and restaurants. Of course, for some people and situations, car travel is a necessity. We're not stopping that. We're encouraging viable alternatives, because small changes can lead to big differences. That change starts with us. Victoria